primary. Bro, every single Democrat I know, you saw the video. I went to the fucking No Kings protest. They're all like, fuck Netanyahu, fuck Trump, you know, this is an illegal war of aggression against a country that didn't attack us. Fascism has taken over this country. Stop the genocide. Like, every single one of these people they've all moved to the left. The liberals have become leftists at a rapid pace. And, like, almost nobody's mirroring that. You can say AOC is still holding down her lane. Ro Khanna is holding down his lane. You know, you look at somebody like Graham Plattner running in Maine. He's doing his thing, running as an unapologetic leftist, right? But so few seem to get the moment that we're in, right? It's so disturbing to me. It's so, like, I need all these people to strip away all of their preconceived notions about politics and ideology and stop trying to have a filter or a framework to view the world through. Just react like a person to what you're seeing. And what we're seeing here is genuinely, like, soul-crushingly catastrophic and horrifying. We're witnessing, like, the Nazification of the U.S. and Israel. We're witnessing illegal bombings of little girls' elementary schools and hospitals and bridges and power plants and desalination plants and steel plants. And they're going after all of this civilian infrastructure and carpet bombing innocents. And you're getting this weird sort of detached, paint-by-numbers approach where Democratic politicians talk about golden era shit. It's just so inhuman, right? Like, it's just so inhuman. And I don't know what it is, because you talk to any Democratic voter and they'll hate this shit. And they'll say all the right things, and they'll take all the right positions, and they're, like, I would trust any of them running the country way more than these politicians, but you look at the fucking Newsoms and the Josh Shapiros and the Cory Bookers, and you go, what is wrong with you guys? Like, seriously, what is wrong with you?
Okay, actually.
What is wrong with you?
Let's turn this down.
Like, all the answers are actually really simple and really straightforward. We need to arrest Netanyahu, break the fuck up with Israel immediately, arrest all the Trump regime criminal thugs. We need to do stuff like Medicare for all and free college and a living wage. We got to end the wars. We got to do a Green New Deal. We got to do paid vacation time by law. We got to do universal daycare. Like, there's so many things that are just, like, common sense. And they're not really talking about any of that, right? Again, to be fair, AOC is, Ro Khanna is, Graham Plattner is. There's some that are doing it. But, like, so many of these people they just want to be president, and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to act. They don't know what to believe. They don't know. They're just trying to say the thing that they think you want to hear, but they have no idea what you actually want to hear. Because, like, they don't say the right thing. They don't talk like the people that were at the No Kings protest. And so, I don't know, man. It is very, very disturbing to me. Now, Ruben Gallego is another one of these people, these pick-me Democrats. And look at this. Senator Ruben Gallego bowls the presidential race. He tells me after winning Arizona in 2024, quote, we have to look at it. He supports U.S. money to Israel for defense. Again, totally incapable of reading the room. Like, I sent somebody to Nazi Germany for defense because they're defending themselves. Then he says, quote, I've seen civilians get hurt in war by both sides. Right, both sides, sure. You got the people doing the genocide and people being genocided. Both sides, equal, right? False equivalence, right? Then he says he opposes the push to abolish ICE. Quote, he calls it ridiculous. Ridiculous to abolish ICE. Ruben Gallego, who wants to be president and wants to run as a Democrat, said it is ridiculous to abolish ICE. Well, what that means is he's calling it ridiculous to abolish an agency that does mass kidnappings and abductions and human trafficking with no due process. He's calling it ridiculous to abolish an agency that disappeared 4,200 people. He's calling it ridiculous to abolish an agency where 40 people have died in their custody just under Trump's second regime. He calls it ridiculous to abolish an agency that was in court because there were allegations they were doing slavery at their detention camps. How is it ridiculous to abolish an agency where there are literal criminals joining ICE and that's been proven? And they've done things like assaulting an 84-year-old married couple and shooting a priest in the face with pepper balls and tear gassing a baby and running over people with cars and tear gassing journalists and cops and zip tying naked kids and throwing them in the back of a U-Haul and deporting a guy for having cologne and fucking allegedly lynching a guy. There's evidence that they lynched a guy. Okay? How is How is this ridiculous to say get rid of this rogue, secret police, paramilitary, Gestapo-ass force? Again, I don't know how to get this across to these people, but you're not serious, guys. Josh Shapiro, Cory Booker, Gavin Newsom, you're not serious people. You're not. Like, you don't actually follow the news. You don't actually know what's going on in this country. You're not actually serious about defeating fascism and imperialism and this death cult that we call MAGA. You're not serious about any of it. And so, like, I don't know what you're doing. I need you to stop it. I need you to go away. And I need you to do that ASAP. I'll also show you this. I asked Senator Gallego about ICE in January. He said he wants to tear it all down and support creating an entirely new immigration force in its place. And so now he totally flipped that position. So seemingly in January he understood the gravity situation. Now he totally flips that position. By the way, while we're on it, I'll also show you this. Here is Cory Booker asked about why he wouldn't go on Hassan Piker's show, and he basically admits he never listened to a fucking thing Hassan said. Here we go.
Through your office, you said, and it's just one person, but it's part of a large group of, I think, people that have this point of view, that you wouldn't say go on like Hassan Piker's stream because he's said some heinous and stupid shit in the past. But to me, I would expect you'd be like chomping at the bit to say, you know what, of course I'm going to go there because I want to represent this point of view in a place that doesn't normally hear it. I want to talk about the ways in which I think some of the things he said are offensive. The same way you might want to go confront somebody on Fox News, or you've met with, talked to Newt Gingrich, and he said crazy shit in the past too. So maybe part of the way out of this is for someone like you to go to those spaces, even if there have been things that are offensive to people.
Yeah, so first of all, somehow we're having a much more deeper and personal conversation than I thought, so I'm going to be very candid with you.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was in a very good way.
I always want to talk to you about deep things.
No, I appreciate that, and that's why I appreciate you, frankly. So here's candor. I had no idea who this person was a few days ago. I never heard their name.
That's going around that, yeah.
And I still haven't heard.
By the way, I'm going to say something controversial. I genuinely think that's disqualifying. If you say I'm going to run for president as a Democrat in the year 2028, and I've never heard of Hassan Piker,
what the fuck?
The biggest left-wing streamer, to me that disconnected from, I'm going to say regular people, but also just like young voters. To me, that disconnected is just, I mean, it is just mind-boggling, right? And I'm sure he probably doesn't know who I am either, and I also find that kind of disqualifying. Like, are you only representing like Gen X and Boomers and what remains of the silent generation? Like, do you not realize that there's this whole group of, my audience is massively millennial. Like, do you think we don't count at all? Do you think Hassan's Gen Z audience doesn't count at all? Like, seriously, stop and think about it. To not know. I'm trying to think of something that's analogous to it, but, you know, it would be like if in 2008 Barack Obama's running and he never heard of Bill Maher or something, right? I know Bill Maher's a bad example because he's so washed and so evil now, but, like, you get the point, right? Like,
well, if you didn't know who he was.
Oh, you're so plugged in with politics. You don't even know, like, the #1 political streamers and the #1 political commentator voices on your side. I mean, it's incredible.
I haven't heard anything he's done. The man sitting over there is my comms director.
It's almost as if...
Oh, he's trying to throw his comms director under the bus. Classy.
There's a bunch of focus on one random streamer, and it's not really the right way to have a big debate. Yeah.
That's my point. Like, so my comms director said to me, oh, you're getting asked this question, would you on the show? And I'm like, well, who is this person? And all he did, the totality of this person he gave me, I don't want he's not on camera, so I don't feel like I'm implicating him. Mm-hmm. The totality of what he did to me was show me 4 or 5 of the most outrageous things.
And they're pretty outrageous.
They are. I said, okay, well, whoa.
Right.
Let's get whatever you saw officially coming out of my office. So here's a couple things, and I have this experience.
Why would that?
I don't want to say daily. My wife experienced it last night in the airport as somebody was wanting to take a moment as I come off this very long flight and to scream at me. I always tell people, give me a Mother's Day card, please, because I get called you mother often. And it's from people on wings of both parties.
Really a Father's Day card.
But calling me a mother.
Well, you're not the mother.
Oh, you're right. I never thought about that analysis here.
So any kind of card you do, I think.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm watching here. This is very bizarre. I'm kind of uncomfortable watching this. But you get the point. Like, look how disconnected he is. Look how unplugged he is from his own base. When Democrats win, you have massive young voter turnout in their favor. You don't know who the #1 left-wing streamer is. And look, maybe he's lying. It's very possible he's lying to just save his ass because he didn't realize that you're really hitting the hornet's nest and you're really hurting your chances to win because he's very popular, right? But I kind of actually believe him. And, you know, his Israel lobby handlers probably were just like, yeah, this guy's an anti-Semite, so just condemn him. And he's like, okay, right? Like, this is who this guy is. He's a creation of Wall Street. He's a creation of the Israel lobby. He's gonna all the crypto money, AI money. He's gonna be one of the most corrupt Democrats to run. But I mean, guys, I'm losing it here. I'm losing it here. They're just so disconnected from what the base wants, what we're demanding. So look, I'll make it as simple as I possibly can. for any Democratic candidate who might stumble across this video and see it. But here's your fucking plan if you're running in 2028. In the same way, MAGA scapegoats and lies about the enemies of this country. They say the enemies are immigrants and trans people and black people, right? They have the wrong enemies. We have the right enemies. My enemies are the Epstein class. It's the billionaires and the fascists and the warmongers. That's who I'm going to oppose. That's who we need to defeat. And so, the core of what a Democrat should run on, we're going to tax the fucking rich and redistribute that money. We're going to arrest the MAGA regime criminals and Epstein criminals. We're going to do a moratorium on AI. We're going to cut off Israel, and we're going to end the wars. That's it. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to say. That's all you got to do. Right? Tax the rich and redistribute it. Universal health care, free college, living wage, all that great stuff. Arrest the MAGA and Epstein criminals, moratorium on AI, cut off Israel, and fucking stop the wars. And unfortunately, I don't think that's I don't think there's going to be that many candidates saying that. And it's a shame, because it's the only way to fight back against this fascist, imperialist, terrorist death cult that is MAGA.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You really want to.
I think it's Republicans that are in power. Like, not Republicans, just like the powerful ownership class.
Why do members of the Democratic Party have such a hard time saying Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal? Israel has committed war crimes. They have committed a genocide. Why can't they start with facts and then from there discuss what policies beyond that support and no support? A lot of people in the Democratic establishment cannot say this. And you may remember I had that viral moment with Senator Cory Booker last year regarding this issue. And now he's gone on Pod Save America, and our friend John Levitt has asked him a very similar question. Play the clip.
To call Benjamin Netanyahu, say, a war criminal. What happens if you do? What changes by just saying, I believe Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, and that signals what our sort of moral parameters are for the kind of leadership in Israel we view as acceptable?
This is not a political test for me. Benjamin Netanyahu is a horrible person who enabled October 7th and has failed to take accountability. Remember, he knew about the Qataris funding this horrific terrorist organization, Hamas. He knew about that. He allowed that funding to continue and has failed in that sense. He has within his own administration people that are committing atrocities right now in the West Bank, as we've seen over these last few weeks. No problem calling him out and saying that he should be held accountable for any crimes that he's committed. Mm-hmm. My focus, and has been consistently before October 7th, is trying to be a force as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee.
Hans, what's your take on that?
My take on that is he's a coward, and that he is not calling him a war criminal. He's dancing around it so that he can still backtrack on it when he is able to forgive the crimes that have been committed. I mean, that's what it tells me. He's a fucking coward.
I think it's interesting that my take is that he will not say Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, because then he has to, by inference there, admit that Israel has committed war crimes.
Right.
And he danced around the West Bank, and he talked about Netanyahu enabling October 7th. But he refuses to say, look, Israel has committed a genocide. These are war crimes, human rights violations that shock the conscience. And we have to, in my opinion, have an opposition party. We have to have a fucking opposition party to all of this insanity. And if we cannot start the conversation off by stating facts, Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. Israel commits war crimes. And then discuss policy and funding beyond that. The Democratic Party is the party that does the same thing over and over again, and it expects a different result. That's my opinion on this. And so obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu, this photo is from July 9th, 2025. And this is where Cory Booker's playing peekaboo over there. You got, Lion Ted up there front and center. But you have a lot of other Democrats here, too. You've got Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff, Chris Coons, and others. And so there's this whole thing right now in the Democratic Party where we have what I call the establishment. And in my opinion, they are preservationists. They want to preserve the system that they govern in. Cory Booker wants to preserve his status, and I think Cory Booker is a fascist collaborator. Benjamin Netanyahu, aside from being a war criminal, is a fascist, and this is a fascist government. And these other Democrats are fascist collaborators. And now, after the loss, Kamala's loss, it's like all the Democrats need to go on podcasts. They need to be less scripted. We can't have cancel culture anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know what your online feed is like, but mine for the last 2 weeks is like, we need to cancel Hassan Piker, and it's all of these moderates and centrists that want to cancel Hassan Piker. Hans, what's your take on all that?
Here's my take. I have long been someone that only develops new ideas and evolves in my thought when I am challenged and when I listen to the perspective of others. And so then I take my perspective and that person's perspective, and then I find what I think is the best. And I do not believe that people get better and or policy gets better if criticism is not shared and integrated and perspectives evolve. And I do not think you can have that if you want to silence anyone that disagrees with you. And you know who else does it, who agrees with me on that, is MAGA, because they allow for no dissent within their party. So I think what's going on with Hassan Piker is an embarrassment to the Democratic establishment and all the people that are perpetuating it.
Okay, so John Lovett, in this interview with Cory Booker, asked him about whether he would appear on Hassan Piker's stream. Play the clip.
As you said, and it's just one person, but it's part of a large group of, I think, people that have this point of view, that you wouldn't say go on like Hassan Piker's stream because he's said some heinous and stupid shit in the past. But to me, I would expect you'd be like chomping at the bit to say, you know what, of course I'm going to go there because I want to represent this point of view in a place that doesn't normally hear it. I want to talk about the ways in which I think some of the things he said are offensive, the same way you might want to go confront somebody on Fox News, or you talked to Newt Gingrich and he said crazy shit in the past too. So maybe part of the way out of this is for someone like you to go to those spaces, even if there have been things that are offensive to people.
Yeah, so first of all, somehow we're having a much more deeper and personal conversation than I thought, so I'm going to be very candid with you.
Every time I hear that,
Yeah, but in a very good way.
I always want to talk to you about deep things.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, let's stop it right there. So this, when I saw this clip, this struck me. Number one, the first thing that strikes me is that Cory Booker will take a photograph with Benjamin Netanyahu in the middle of a genocide, but draws the line with going on Hassan Piker's Twitch. But the second thing that struck me there was when Cory Booker said, oh, this conversation is much deeper than I had thought. And I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. When we filmed with Cory Booker, after Kamala lost, all of the Democrats came to us. We want to be on your pod. We want to be on your pod. And we're like, great. Yeah, you can be on our pod. I don't have a corporate news background, so I ask questions that I think are relevant. And some Democratic politicians come on and they don't want to know what they're talking about and they don't care. They just want to talk about the country and whatever questions I have for them. Others are a lot more scripted and controlled. And Cory Booker's office, it's in our producers. Cory wants to talk about XYZ. And I saw those talking points, but right out of the gates, I asked him, what have you had it with? And he said, I've had it with corporate money. And I was just like, bitch, please, you take like millions of dollars in APAC money. So it led down that rabbit hole, right? Because I was like, wait, this seems hypocritical. And instead of staying on the script that his office sent me, I went with his answer as a normal conversation should. Well, the whole time I'm asking about Benjamin Netanyahu, his office is stage 5 melting down, texting our producers, trying to get her to, like, hey, we didn't agree to talk about this, blah, blah. My point in this is not to pick on Cory Booker or his staff. They are operating the way they've always operated in corporate media. That's the way it's been. They were doing what they've always done. The problem that's happening now is we have these spaces where people have realized their politicians are bought and paid for and their news anchors are bought and paid for, and everybody's, whether it's Republican or Democrat, wants independent voices and independent spaces. And so, obviously, that clip went viral, and the staff was melting down for reasons that they should have, because it didn't make him look that great. But another person I've had come on who flew to New York to sit down with me for an hour in person is Ro Khanna. And it was just what time and where was the only question beforehand. There was no what are we going to talk about, but Matt didn't care. When I said, hey, let's do some Epstein stuff, he goes, Jennifer, whatever you want to talk about, I am pleased to talk to your audience. That's what Representative Ro Khanna had. So I think what I'm getting at here is when you have moral clarity, it doesn't matter what John Rudd asks you, what Jennifer Welch asks you, you don't have to have your people in the back, wait, what's going on here? Or would Cory Booker have to say, oh, I didn't realize we were going to get this deep. You just come in and sit down and say, ask me anything on the planet you want. I don't know if I'm going to have all the answers for you, but I'm going to try. And that's what a lot of progressive Democrats do. Needless to say, we don't hear from Senator Booker's office that much anymore. But I welcome him back on. I don't dislike Cory Booker. I don't think he and his staff did anything particularly wrong. That's how it's handled with corporate news. But it seems to me like they want this whole thing where it's like, okay, we need to go on podcasts and we need to speak like normal people. And then we need to get rid of cancel culture. And now they're trying to cancel Hassan Piker. We can take pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu and I like Cory Booker and that. He's like,
Another thing you think about, okay, we're going to go on podcasts, we're going to be unscripted. You can't go on a podcast and be unscripted if your staff is telling the podcast what the talking points are. So yeah, talk unscripted and be open to anything.
I completely agree. And so this is something where I feel like the Democratic establishment wants their cake and they want to eat it too. We need to go on podcasts and talk like normal people, but here's our normal people talking points. Because normal people,
here's your script.
Normal people conversation. And then it's like we've got to quit with this cancel culture. And then Cory Booker's like, I draw the line with Hassan Piker. The baby's gonna be there. Here I am. And so it's just like, I think the thing that pisses me off about the Democratic establishment is the condescending nature they treat us. Like, nobody gives a shit if you go on Hassan's stream, if you go on an addict, if you go on Theo Vaughn, if you go on, I'm even saying right-wingers, if you go on, what's his name, Joe Rogan. If you go on Joe Rogan, I don't give a shit. Go on all of these podcasts, nobody gives a shit. But do not treat us with abject stupidity that you are going to draw the line at Hassan Piker, who has killed 0 people, and then go play peekaboo patty cake with Benjamin Netanyahu, who is an objective, 100% killer, the world's biggest killer of children right now is the IDF at the instruction of Benjamin Netanyahu. So that's where Cory is with all of this. And then let me show you where Ro Khanna is on this. Play this clip from Meet the Press this weekend.
Do you have any regrets about appearing on his show?
None, and I would go again. But I, of course, condemn those comments. I mean, I've described Hamas as a terrorist state, and we need to unequivocally condemn anti-Semitism. But Hassan Piker was at the DNC in 2024, covering Vice President Harris. What should the standard of the Democrats be? Should we not go on Theo Vaughn? Should we not go on Sean Ryan? Should we not go on Joe Rogan? Should we just have these purity tests of canceling folks? The lesson of the last election is we've got to be out there. We've got to engage. It's a complex, messy, multiracial democracy. I will defend my views, but the people who are saying don't engage will cost us future elections.
Do you run?
I completely agree with him here. And I think that what they should be saying is, instead of being focused on these specific streamers or podcasters, let's focus on the actual war criminals. Let's focus on, I think Theo Vaughn pretty much calls out Benjamin Netanyahu and the government of Israel. Pretty crystal clear. There's a lot of bipartisan reality-based people that see that. The problem with the Democratic establishment is they want to preserve the system that lost to Trump. And I don't want to preserve that. I don't want any part of that. And, but we can talk about it. Bulwark did a deep dive on this. Sarah and Tim talked about it. Rokon has weighed in. Pod Save guys have had Cory Booker weigh in. Regardless, politicians do whatever you want to do. But what do the Democrats, this system they're trying to uphold, these establishment Democrats, what does the polling say? Do the Democrats approve of Democrats right now? Play the clip.
Congressional Dems have the right priorities. Look at this. Overall, 74%, nearly 3 in 4 say no. Just 25% overall say yes. You might say, okay, well, at least Dems like Democrats. Not the case. Look at this. The majority of Democrats are independents who lean Democrats. Look at this. 55% say no, congressional Democrats do not have the right priorities. And then you just see a minority, 45% of Democrats say that congressional Democrats have the right priorities. This to me just jumps out the screen because it screams primary challenges all over the map, and it says that even if Democrats don't like Donald Trump, they don't like their own party either when it comes to Congress. And overall, I mean, Mike.
Do you see that? Here's the thing. These establishment Democrats are operating as though they have a super high favorability, and they don't. They simply do not.
Well,
they're so out of touch with where the base is right now. If you want to see the approval ratings of the Democratic Party jump up, if they were to say, okay, Schumer, hit the bricks, we're done with you, we're voting to get a new minority leader. And the same with Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, seriously, you would be like, oh my God, yes, finally they're fighting. And here's an anecdotal story for everyone. My husband is from a small town called Hugo, Oklahoma. It's like the armpit of Oklahoma, this town, right? And so he goes down there for a funeral. And this is MAGA dump truck. I mean, this is where it is just crazy cult MAGA. He's down there for a funeral.
I didn't realize.
And much to his surprise, everybody's coming up to him saying, oh my God, your wife's podcast. Tell her to stay after it and tell her to stay after those Democrats too. They're not fighting hard enough for us. So I just think, and of course that's anecdotal, but also I have conversations, perhaps you have conversations with people in red states. We want fighters. We don't want people who play peekaboo with Benjamin Netanyahu. We don't want people that can't say the sky is blue. And the equivalent of saying the sky is blue right now is saying that Benjamin Netanyahu is a fucking war criminal. It's objectively true. Pumps.
Well, I completely agree with you. And the only thing I would add to that is we are going into a midterm where we know they have gerrymandered, they have told us on national TV, they are going to put ice around these voting booths. They're trying to pass the SAVE Act.
Yep.
So Democrats, people are going to vote for you because they don't like fascism. But if you're not starting to fight now against all of these things that they've already said they're going to do, if you're not filing lawsuits, if you're not coming out against us, they're trying to put everyone in a position that they cannot vote, that their vote will not be heard, and they're building a bunker underneath the ballroom, all that. But we've got to start now making policy and going after politicians, and we have to do that with clear eyes and with fighters, because the midterms are coming and they're coming quickly. And if you can't get out there now, you're not going to help yourself much then.
I just think the thing is a lot of these liberals are fascist collaborators, and scholars show us historically that liberals collaborate with fascists. Never are you able to take down fascism from a point of centrism. That has never happened. We have to have an opposition group. The centrists and the moderates, we pick many people who, oh my God, I want Brown and Sam your podcast, but they didn't say cheese. We're not going to beat fascism with that. So go on whatever podcast you want to or don't want to, but know this. Look in the data. You can try to cancel Hassan. You can try to cancel iPaddic. What you're doing is you're telling millions of people that either watch that stream or watch other shows that you don't like that they're wrong. And that's incredibly patronizing and condescending, because what they see is the Democratic response is being wrong, weak, and impotent. And the polling shows that. All right, that's all we have. Like, subscribe. We'll be back later. America's top Nazi, Stephen Miller, has gotten a memo that everybody hates his guts. Everybody hates him. Hold it. He has the worst favorability ratings of any American right now. Nobody likes Stephen Miller. Everybody's following the wild
I hope it is.
Security advisor has avoided public appearances. The New York Times reported in the wake of a disastrous immigration crackdown that culminated in the deaths of 2 Americans in Minnesota, Alex Craig and Mike, both 37, at the hands of federal agents. And goes on to say, additionally, Times announced very clear warning boxes. Once every 4 days, such time returns to life. But in the wake of Cuddy's January 24th death, Miller appeared on January twice in February, despite a national outcry over policies he has helped craft, and polling in recent months ranking him among the most loathed political figures in the United States. Miller still presides over shaping new zero-tolerance immigration policies, just not as
I don't
publicly.
even know what he's the office.
So, is this a good thing or a bad thing? First of all, I love that everybody hates him. Good job on you guys. Secondly, this is really dangerous. And Ryan, one of our producers, and I were talking about this morning. And when he's on Fox, we can see how crazy he is. We can see how diabolical he is. And the American public saw it. And that's why he polls so incredibly low. So now he's doing all of this stuff in private with hardly any pushback at all. So to me, this makes it far more dangerous. And remember, Stephen Miller is the guy that wants to deport 100 million people. 100 million people. The United States is a population of 340 million people. Stephen Miller is a war criminal. He traffics in anti-American, anti-Constitution Nazism. He is a propagandist to his core. And as we look at the people surrounding Trump, you have Nazi Stephen Miller, and then we have our little smoky-eye sociopath, J.D. Vance, all right? J.D. Vance is the heir apparent of the MAGA movement. Peter Thiel, who is a very dangerous billionaire that owns Palantir, who decided he doesn't think we should have democracy anymore. He bought J.D. Vance because J.D. Vance is a prostitute available for purchase and installed him into the Trump regime. And so Trump, here's the thing about Trump. Trump has said, I like hanging out with losers. Makes me feel better about myself. And Trump is so petty, and he's just such a vindictive criminal that he will not allow anyone to shine. So in the dick-over to end all dick-overs, Trump puts J.D. Vance in charge of fraud, calling him the fraud czar. Pop this up. Ron Filipkowski says in January 2025, he said Elon Musk was going to balance the budget with Doge funding fraud. On February 2nd, 25, he said terrorists would balance the budget. On June 2nd, he said OEBB would balance the budget. On 6/12, he said Trump cards, and the gold cards, would balance the budget. Now he says Vance will do it, and he says we call him the fraud czar. And his focus will be everywhere, but primarily in those blue states where crooked Democratic, he doesn't say that, he says it. He says crooked Democrat. Obviously, crooked Democratic politicians like those in California, Illinois, Minnesota, and has to throw racism, Somalia, beware. And he goes on here. And then he wishes JD the best of luck. To me, he's starting to say that people, because he's like, I think he wants the MAGA movement to with him. I think that's how big his narcissism is. He's not going to be like, oh, JD, please carry on my policies and help America. This is all about Trump. When he dies, he wants it to die. So he has set up a policy of dick over and scapegoating. Putting J.D. Vance as being in charge of fraud, the fraud czar, do you remember how Biden put Kamala as the border czar and how much the Republicans exploited that? Democrats, here's an opportunity. This is, the executive branch is a crime syndicate. It's full of dirty cops. President Trump's a dirty cop, J.D. Vance is a dirty cop, they hang out with dirty cops. It's not that deep. Pinning all of the fraud on J.D. Vance is an electoral winner for us because the fraud in this regime is so incredibly rampant. Pinning it all on J.D. Vance and doing reputational damage to him is a win for us. So thank you, President Hanks, for doing that. Now, here's who else he's doing. We've been reporting on this for the last 2 or 3 weeks. He is setting up to throw Pete Hegseth 100% under the bus for the Iran war. And I love it when bad things happen to bad people. And I just want to say, Pete Hegseth is a racist, sexist, and homophobe and hypocrite. He is in a state of MAGA/Christian psychosis. on a national scale, making Moses Mike Grinder Johnson look like a Christian like Christian. Okay, Pete Hegseth is completely insane. Let's watch this video right here.
Then unfortunately, I called Pete, I called General Kane, I called a lot of our great people. We have great people, and I said, let's talk. We got a problem in the Middle East. We have a country known as Iran for 47 years has been a purveyor of terror, and they're very close to having a nuclear weapon. We can keep going and get that 50,000 up to 55 and 60, there's no end. Or we can take a stop and make a little journey into the Middle East and eliminate a big problem. And Pete, I think you were the first one to speak up.
So that's just one nugget of where he's thrown Pete under the bus. He's also said that he thought about like ending the war, and Pete's like, no, we got to keep going. So there's no way. This is a man who's avoided accountability his entire life. All of the fraud, little smoky eye, sociopath is going to have to put on an extra smoky eye when his ass is hauled in front of a Democratic Congress to account for all of the rampant crime and fraud and all of these dirty cops that run the federal government. And then Pete Hegseth, you're taking the fall back against Nuremberg, war criminal city here. Because Trump has immunity. And if you guys think he has a file somewhere with pardons for all of you guys, you have no idea how tennis he is. None. He will drop you like a box of hot rocks the second he doesn't need you, and the second you can be blamed for anything that helps him avoid accountability. And so, under Pete Hegseth's rule as the Secretary of Defense, I refuse to call it the Secretary of War, just for spite him because it's fucking stupid, the Armed Services Committee is going to have a lot of work to do because we are seeing so many generals get fired, and a lot of generals not get promoted but are earned it. The military is a meritocracy. Black men and women have earned promotions. Pete Hegseth refuses to do it because he's an unrepentant racist and misogynist. And then the white generals that push back on him, that push back on his suggestion of war crimes, that's just my opinion, and that push back on him saying he will not promote people who have earned it, then he shit cans them. And so my thing is, at some point there will be a reckoning for all of this. And so let's call up this post. Greg T. Sargent, Post, News. Now that Hegseth fired another top general, Representative Adam Smith tells me that if Dems take the House, Armed Services Committee will seek testimony from people pushed out by Hegseth. Dems will also probe why he stalled promotion of black female officers. And this is just another question about him. In my opinion, these could be just complete class action discrimination lawsuits. I mean, this is going to be a scandal surrounding the Pentagon for quite some time. We're just in the beginning stages of this. And why is he doing all this? Why is he firing all of these people? Because we know from Trump 1.0, Trump wants generals like Hitler's generals. The people that worked with Trump in his first administration quoted Trump as saying, why can't I have generals like Hitler's generals? And what he wants are people that are willing to be 100% loyal to him and people that will commit war crimes. Why does he want this? Because he doesn't like packing his toys up and leaving places. And his toys have been scattered all over the White House this time. He's going to turn shit down like King Kong if he doesn't like something. So I believe he has eyes exactly where he wants it, and they will be using voter suppression tactics on election day. But even despite that, I think that the election will be too big to rig, and the blue tsunami will be so massive. So that's why he has to have a military in place that he can finally execute his long-term vision of this radical coup that he started January 6th. All right, listeners, you know my husband is a hypochondriac. I talk about it all the time on the podcast. And when it's so flash, I hate this mess. And Bondi has been replaced by acting AG Todd Blanche. And Todd Blanche is Trump's former attorney in his felony cases. So let me just tell you, Todd Blanche took, how many felonies did he get, Ryan? 34? 34. So Todd Blanche is a 34-time loser in court. So remember when Trump said, I like to hang out with losers? One of the biggest losers that Trump likes to hang out with is his losing criminal defense attorney, Todd Blanche. And he thought that something after Bondi would be better is a fool's errand. Because something after Bondi is going to be worse. And the biggest problem Trump has right now are these Epstein files. Because they are relentless, they are nowhere near fully released, and he is at the epicenter of them. Do we think Todd Blanche, the 34-time loser, is going to all of a sudden have a moral compass? No, play the clip.
To clarify, is the public going to learn the identity of the man who abused the girls with the future release? And if not, why not? And then I have a follow-up.
Baked in assumption, your question that I've never said and I don't know to be true. Is the public going to learn about men that abuse these girls? What does that mean? I don't know what it means.
Well, the men who abuse the young women that through Epstein's directly.
We say why. And the industry really wasn't why. If we had information, we would the public justice about men who abuse women. We would prosecute them, right? You talked about the work that we're doing. That's why I said that. There's this built-in assumption that somehow there's this hidden Trump's information of men that we don't know, that we're covering up, or we're not going to prosecute. That is not the case. I don't know whether there are men out there that abuse these women. If we look,
they do not. They do not know. And now we know why he lost the felony case against Trump 34 times. So this guy is a dipshit. You can't even answer a simple question. And he is a criminal defense attorney. So his instinct is he's going to go in there and run. So what happens to these people? What happens to these people that say, I'm loyal Donald J. Trump. I am going to, whatever this man wants, I am going to help him execute his vision. Morals be damned. Intuition be damned. This man is who I'm going to go politics on. What happens to these people? Fuck this up. Pamela's portrait has already been taken off the Justice Department walls and dumped in the trash. But this was a photo obtained by the House now. So here's what happens to these people. They pick you up and drop you in the trash. It's that simple. Hannah Bondi and her loyalty means nothing to Donald Trump. I've already illustrated for you the next people that are going to be thrown in the trash: Smokey Eye Sociopath, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth is going to take the fall for this, and Todd Lynch. You are going to end up probably in fetal position at some point, crying, atoning for your covering up a child rape. You see how they're going to look at some point, all we're doing is delaying accountability. At some point, there will be accountability for all of this. It will come. But these people think they're special. The Latinos think they're special. The Log Cabin Republicans think they're special. Clarence Thomas thinks he's special. And Bondi thought she was so very special. She's in the trash. Less than 24 hours later, you are trash to this man. We know because our friends that are scholars that study autocrats, that study these fascists, they hate their supporters. They have nothing but disdain for their supporters. And Trump has nothing but disdain for the people who work for him. He called them all losers. So Todd Blanche, you will be next. You will be the next person whose image is in the trash can. You think he's going to give you a pardon? Somewhere deep inside that petty old Queen Trump, he's still pissed at you for losing, for getting 34 felony counts. And he will fuck you when the time's right. All right, that's all we have. Like, subscribe, comment. We'll be back later with more news. MAGA always likes to remind us that the United States of America is a Christian nation. So what did their Christian president, the one that all of the evangelical pastors and preachers lay their hands on, what did he post on Easter morning? Here is Jake Tapper with part of the post. Play the clip.
He has just threatened Iran.
Yeah, I've seen this. What else we got? What is this? I don't know. I'm getting clickbaited all left.
Stephen Miller is supposed to be Donald Trump's right-hand man. And with that, you would expect some level of loyalty from Donald Trump to Stephen Miller, from Stephen Miller to Donald Trump. But a new report is exposing that both ways, that loyalty, it just doesn't really exist. Does Stephen care that much about Trump? Or is the cognitively declining president his vessel to get what he wants? Does Donald Trump actually want Stephen Miller by his side all the time? Or is he ready to fire him, considering he has already essentially put him in a box, shut him up, and kicked him to the curb? If you hate Stephen Miller, you are going to love this video. We're going to have a little fun, we're going to do a little gossip, and we're going to talk about some news at DHS that just hasn't been covered enough at the end, so do stick around. Yes, it's about Kristi Noem and her affair, and how we still need to prosecute her and Corey Lewandowski, but it does all start with Stephen Miller, and when Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican, had to say about Miller and where his real loyalties lie, or we get how Donald Trump's kicked him to the curb. Now Stephen Miller, maybe on the outs.
So who are these sick-faced cowards?
Well, I'm not going to get into details. I think I've shared with you my opinion about Stephen Miller. Look, I don't think anybody should think that Stephen Miller's going to be a curator at the Trump Presidential Library. When he's not here, he's going to go find another way to serve. But I don't think that he's particularly loyal. I also don't believe he's got a particularly great reputation for working with people in the White House. But what really made me angry is when he had the audacity to go to cameras and say it's the position of the United States that Greenland should become a part of the United States. That is absolutely the proverbial straw. I had taken and heard a lot of his comments and decided to internalize it. But being involved in the Senate NATO Observer Group and knowing how offensive that was to our allies, knowing that Denmark had on a per capita basis, the same number of deaths as the U.S. and Afghanistan made me angry.
Huh. Very interesting you would say that, Tommy boy. Stephen Miller really isn't that loyal to Donald Trump. He just cares about his own aims. When Trump is done, he'll find another job, he'll keep it pushing. To me, that kind of sounds like Stephen Miller might already be auditioning for another role. And it makes sense. How much does Donald Trump like Stephen Miller at this point? Let's be honest. Stephen Miller has taken the issue that Donald Trump loves most, his illegal mass deportation agenda, and he loves it most because it gives him the opportunity to keep things as big as possible, and has made it historically unpopular. We're going to get into that in a second. This is part of the reason that this new report about Trump and Miller's relationship is coming out. But Stephen is losing his mind, that his little pet project isn't going according to plan, and people don't like him around the White House as much as before. Maybe they never really did like Stephen Miller, and so he's out for his new gig. So maybe right now, as Donald Trump is an obvious face for cognitive decline, and Stephen Miller is reportedly always strong around his back, he's doing that more and more. But it is still not working, and we are seeing the effect. I want to talk about it, and the fact that a staffer under Miller, I guess above, but technically under, had to be hospitalized because of his bad behavior and bad poll numbers that they smacked out. ICE chief hospitalized as Stephen Miller yelling. He's yelling at him. Acting ICE head Todd Lyons appears to have having a rough time working under this administration. Todd Lyons, the acting chief of immigration and customs enforcement, has been hospitalized twice in the last 7 months due to stress, according to Politico. Politico, as we've covered on this show before, reporting is based on 2 current and 2 former sources within the Trump administration. The sources are describing the incident, one in which Lyons became so distressed when ICE agents locate a migrant on their target list after a ride along with top administration officials that one of his bodyguards took a portable defibrillator from a nearby government office to Lyons in case he needed medical intervention. Lyons' face became scarlet. He began aggressively sweating. The sources say this all comes as Stephen Miller just won't stop screaming for God. And of course, Stephen Miller is screaming. A new Fox News poll shows the disapproval of ICE is on the rise still. An increasing number of voters disapprove of the job that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is doing, with nearly half wanting Congress to reduce its funding. Nearly twice as many voters strongly disapprove as strongly approve of ICE. The increase in disapproval can mostly be attributed to voters under the age of 30, my generation, plus 17 points more disapproving than in September, Independents plus 13, and plus 11, Democrats plus 8. So Stephen Miller has taken one of the issues that Donald Trump cared most about in his administration and tarnished it, ruined his ability to use it, to talk about it, and honestly also employ it as a bit of leverage. Donald Trump thought that he could bake together the SAVE Act and ICE funding into one big package to get through Congress. And because ICE is so unpopular, Donald Trump also couldn't force his voter suppression bill upon Senate Democrats, and that rests on the shoulder of Stephen Miller, which is why it's unsurprising that Donald Trump is breaking with his former best buddy. Stephen Miller retreats in humiliation after deadly misstep. Stephen Miller, the architect of Donald Trump's most severe immigration policies, has seemingly been hiding from the American people. Miller, a longtime Trump advisor who serves as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor, has avoided public appearances, the New York Times reported, in the wake of a disastrous immigration crackdown that culminated in the deaths of 2 American citizens in Minnesota, Alex Preddy and Renee Good, both 37, at the hands of federal agents. Additionally, a New York Times analysis found that Miller appeared on Fox News, the president's favorite network, once every 4 days since Trump returned to the White House. But in the wake of Preddy's killing, January 24th, Miller appeared on the network only twice in February and has severely limited his time on air. Funny enough, the same thing happened to Pam Bondi in the lead up to her firing. Pam Bondi was temporarily forbidden by the White House from doing Fox News interviews at the height of the public's outrage over the Epstein files, the report from CNN shows. So Stephen Miller is hiding. Stephen Miller has been hustling. Donald Trump doesn't want to see his ugly face with his bulging little vein and that bald, cool head of his on his TV. He's done with his best buddy. So maybe they ever best buddies, but they're just using each other for their own personal goals. Because that's what it seems like is the case. And that right now is the theme of a lot of what is happening in Donald Trump's White House. Everyone is just using each other. And it's very interesting because Donald Trump, honestly, right now, very easy to use. If you wanted to go into that White House, or you wanted to kind of, puppet Donald Trump, I wouldn't think it's that difficult. Donald Trump has always been susceptible to listen to the last person who is in his ear. They're the last person who gets the final word. Honestly, always what Donald Trump is going to do. He has a short attention span. He's not that smart. Donald Trump doesn't think critically. These are not new statements to you. This is something we understand about the man, and that's always been beneficial to Stephen Miller, who even on Donald Trump's immigration policy has run around him to make it even dramatic, even more deadly, and even worse. Now Donald Trump is dealing with a negative approval rating on the issue he wants to go back to. Remember 2018? Remember those midterms? What did Donald Trump talk about nonstop? Caravans, caravans, caravans. That was Donald Trump's message. Donald Trump can't talk about immigration anymore because it is an unpopular issue for him. That is because of Stephen Miller. So of course Donald Trump doesn't want to see Stephen Miller. Of course Stephen Miller is hiding. Stephen Miller is worried about getting fired. He started hiding early when Kristi Noem was about to get fired. And now Stephen, knowing that Donald Trump is on a purging spree, possibly thinking about another firing in his administration. Could it be Howard Lutnick? Could it be Tulsi Gabbard? Could it be Stephen Miller? I don't know. We're not done talking about DHS. Democrats still are going to be demanding more accountability, especially as we get new revelations about the corruption rampant in DHS. Of course, Stephen Miller, you have close ties, buddy. You personally profited off a lot. Private prisons, mineral deals. Stephen Miller has made money off of this White House. Usually Donald Trump reserves that just for himself. The DHS has certainly been rampant. Rachel Maddow did a great job breaking down some of that corruption that we cannot forget about. So I want to take a look before we close on a little bit more Stephen Miller.
There's a new Inspector General investigation into alleged corruption at the Department of Homeland Security. The soliciting and handling of contracts, quote, including the involvement of former Secretary Kristi Noem and her de facto Chief of Staff, Corey Lewandowski. There was already an internal audit that had been sparked in the department for some reason, but now on top of that, there's a new and apparently quite urgent, quite aggressive investigation, which apparently included investigators searching the offices of one Homeland Security official last week, an official who had been reportedly placed in her DHS job by Corey Lewandowski and Kristi Noem. After NBC News recently reported that Corey Lewandowski reportedly sought multi-million-dollar payments from companies that were contracting with Homeland Security, including specifically companies that operate immigration prisons, he was seeking multi-million-dollar payments for himself from those companies as he was acting as the de facto Chief of Staff at that agency, including an unusual degree of oversight of contracts. I mean, Mr. Lewandowski denies this, but Democratic members of Congress have now opened their own investigation into what may have been going on there. So I'm just, you put these things together, I'm just gonna say, hey, you guys, anybody wondering why it is that they slapped an extra 60, 80, $100 million on top of the price tag for these Trump prison camp warehouses they're buying in multiple states? Through totally opaque processes that make no financial sense whatsoever on their face? Yeah, you guys maybe want to slow that down a sec? 3,000 people in the Hagerstown, Maryland public square would like you to slow that down for sure. Social Circle, Georgia, town officials put a lock on the water meter at the warehouse the Trump administration is trying to turn into a prison there. I think they'd like you to slow it down a little bit, take another look. The city council in Salt Lake City, Utah, just voted to cap the amount of water they'd be allowed to use at the warehouse they want to be a huge prison there as well. That's one where they appear to have overpaid $48 million for that warehouse for no explicable reason. Yeah, maybe they'd like you to slow that down, take another look at that one as well. Why'd they overpay for all these things in such a rush? Why'd they overpay by tens of millions of dollars at one of these things after another? Who made off with all of that money? Whose pockets just got stuffed with the tens of millions of dollars in taxpayer money that is unaccounted for in almost all of these transactions? Yeah, you think you might want to slow it down a little bit? That stink is what you think it is. It smells like corruption, which, you know what? Kings and dictators on their golden toilets are quite famous for.
The corruption is rampant, and that is a given in this administration. Donald Trump is honestly fine with the corruption. I think we know this. That's what all the insider trading via his war has been about. One thing he's not okay with is the public humiliation. And this has all been one big public humiliation after another. No wonder Stephen Miller is hiding from the cameras. He knows that Donald Trump watches. And he knows when Donald Trump sees his bald little head, he's going to get pissed as hell, and it might be the end of his job. And oh boy, we can only just hope. And we're going to be covering it all on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.
This is good news, and we're getting some IMs about this. You'll recall, I guess it was, 2 months ago? We had Avi Lewis on. He is a filmmaker, a writer. The last time I think I had him on this show was probably like in 2005 when we were on Air America. And he and his wife, Naomi Klein, came on to talk about their film called The Taking, about employees taking over a factory, I want to say in Brazil. He came on the program. He was talking about running for the leadership position in Canada's NDP party, and some good news.
And we need a government that doesn't just talk about Canadian values on the world stage. We need one that acts with moral clarity when it matters. When missiles are falling on schools and hospitals. When Israel commits a genocide in Gaza. We call it by its name, and we do everything in our power to bring it to an end. When the U.S. and Israel start an illegal and reprehensible war against Iran that sets the world on fire, we say Canada should have absolutely no role in it whatsoever.
That's happening just north of us in this country called Canada.
Everyone who is
it'll be
like, congrats.
He's already under attack by, I think, like sort of like the more conservative parts of that party. But it's going to be fascinating to see if having a full-throated leftist will what it will do to the NDP.
So close.
And
it's necessary because Carney, despite that speech making a lot of hay with liberals internationally, was one of the Western leaders that was initially supportive of Trump's, or at the very least rhetorically supportive of Trump's criminal war in Iran. Like, there needs to be a left flank that's robust and pushing liberals in Canada. Because otherwise they'll just govern the way they always did and not take into account what got us here in the first place.
Let's turn to some other things. Yeah, I'll read some IMs. Golden Oyster Cult. The latest email from the Department of Education regarding the SAVE plan has me petrified. I have until July to switch from the SAVE plan to something else. The lowest monthly payment I can get is more than double what I was paying under SAVE. Joe Biden's slow-walking relief and then using the wrong law to do it will forever be my supervillain origin story. I mean, look, I don't know if I subscribe to that narrative of Biden's slow-walking relief and using the wrong law to do it. I can't speak to the slow-walking relief, but the wrong law thing, it is quite clear the Supreme Court is not going to allow that. It's just simply not going to, under any law that you're talking about. It might be obvious to you or I that this law should be upheld, but the Supreme Court has made it pretty clear. They're just going to stop it.
They had a trifecta in 2020. Could have passed a bill about it.
They could have passed a bill about it. That is true. Assuming...
the same problems that we never want to confront about the secret Republicans that masquerade as Democrats
Right.
that we have to,
What does it take? What if the SCOTUS does allow for the denial of mail-in ballots that are postmarked prior to the election day but arrive after? Would there ever be a legislative fix for that decrepit decision? I imagine. I mean,
Decrepit.
I think so, but I'm not sure what it would be because I mean the states allow for it. The states are supposed to run their elections. I don't know. I also get the sense that it may not work in the Republicans' favor in the way they think it is. A lot of military ballots come in late.
all of the Republican family members I have in North Dakota vote by mail.
If you're disabled and older, yeah.
I mean, people frankly don't like to go to the polling place if they can do it from home.
Devoid reality. Sam, I follow you on Instagram. If you post something, eventually I might DM you some photos of my apple, cherry, and peach trees I'll be eventually planting this year. I can also send you a photo of my giant log pile that I have to get sown for fencing and building projects, so get posting.
Who's quid pro quo now?
The socialist account. Will the official Sam Cedar Instagram account be all woodworking and DIY projects? Show off those skills. I mean, eventually, that is my retirement plan. Pandemic anxiety. A YouTube tutorial of you doing the Instagram demo of crap after work would make a great 1.5 content. Ad hominem. Majority Report, My Pillow competitor, Emma's Pillow of Lies. Make it happen, and please and thank you.
He said I tucked myself in under a pillow of lies. He mixed it up. You tuck yourself in under a blanket. You lay your head down on a pillow.
Well, you could have a very large pillow.
Yeah.
I saw that. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show.
Everybody had a nice Easter.
Even amidst the government shutdown, even amidst supposedly the mass deportation thing being wound down or dialed back just a little bit because of the bad press, they're terrorizing people all over America. And I wanted to give you updates on a couple examples of how that's working out. One involves the newlywed spouse of a soldier who is mid-training to deploy to our forever war, being detained by ICE. The couple is Annie Ramos, a college student with no criminal record, and Matthew Blank. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents entered the base where he was training and detained his wife, an undocumented Honduran immigrant who was brought to the U.S. as a toddler. By nightfall, she was in a detention facility with hundreds of women facing deportation. And obviously, this is a horrible mistake. I mean, what a bad look to detain the wife of a soldier training to potentially die on in Iranian soil or whatever. And so, obviously, they tracked her down, they released her. No, I'm kidding. They're not repentant at all about this. I'm going to update you on all of it. So Sergeant Blank enlisted more than 5 years ago, assigned to a brigade at Fort Polk, Louisiana, set to begin training at the end of the month for deployment. He said our plan was to drive over, bring her to the office to get her military ID, and activate her military spouse benefits. She was going to move in after the Easter weekend. Instead, she got ripped away from me. They were in the process of her gaining legal permanent residency through marriage. He said, I knew she didn't have status. We were doing everything the right way. And this is what DHS said about the wife of one of their soldiers being detained and prepared for deportation. In a statement, they said that Ms. Ramos had been arrested, quote, after she attempted to enter a military base with her husband. She has no legal status to be in this country and was issued a final order of removal by a judge. This administration is not going to ignore the rule of law. They're gonna deport her. She was brought as a toddler. She didn't come here. She was taken here. She's never committed a crime. She's the wife of a soldier. She's a college student. She's just trying to become a good, responsible American. They're shipping her out. Worst of the worst, JR. Is that maybe the most vicious lie since the big lie? The worst of the worst? I think it is. What do you think?
Well, they've been doing it kind of consistently. There was so many ways that this whole immigration system has been destroying so many people's lives. And this is just, I guess, the latest one. And it's more stark because, obviously, of this whole war where Donald Trump is pushing more and more people to get sent off. Which, again, also, I want to make sure we remind everyone, they have not taken the draft off the table. Caroline Leavitt said that Trump is too wise to do something like take that off the table. Just a quick side note, just in case we're still wondering who all they expect to die for this guy. But at the same time, we'll go and attack people's families at the exact same time of when they're sending folks off. It's kind of odd. I feel like these things should be highlighted a lot more. And also the fact that they're on vacation right now for their second week and still haven't funded things like TSA. But ICE agents can run up on people and do this as they're also apparently supposed to start takeover at airports. We have to make sure that we document and remember the process as of which all of these things are going down. They don't give a damn about any service members. They don't give a damn about their families, their children, the amount of money that we're spending on this, the high costs of the financially to even to human costs. They don't care about anything. There's nothing they care about. I feel like every story that we can talk about now should always end with, so when are we going to remove this guy from office? When are we going to remove this entire administration from office? When is there going to be such a severe response to the most severe type of policies and agendas that any of these folks have ever put in place for us to stop this? Yes. I don't know if this is even going to get that far. I remember reading this, and I didn't hear about it. I didn't do it. I didn't read about it anymore after that because I was looking for more on it, and it just starts and it ends with how much you read on it.
The moral on it is that she will be shipped to a country that she has never been in before, or not as a conscious, living adult. And that'll be it. Her life is ruined. His life is ruined. Because he joined the military, honestly. She was tracked because she tried to enter a military base. So, just heads up. Maybe don't join the military. It puts you on the radar of the secret police. Anyway, we also have more child sexual abuse that we can put at the doorstep of the Trump administration. The blood is on their hands. A 3-year-old who was sexually abused after DHS separated her from her parents. We don't know who exactly the girl is, but she crossed the border with her mother last September, was separated from her mother, who was charged with making false statements. The girl was then sent to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which operates under HHS, and places children in foster or shelter settings. Her father, who is a legal citizen, tried to get her, but the government repeatedly told him they just couldn't make an appointment for him to be fingerprinted. Don't worry, we'll get around to it. What's the worst that could happen while you wait? Allow me to describe the worst that could happen while he waited. Court documents state that during that time, the girl reportedly being sexually abused by an older child who was living in the same foster setting in Harlingen, Texas. She told a caregiver that she'd been abused multiple times and had suffered bleeding as a result. So it was allowed to continue multiple times. The Office of Refugee Resettlement only told her father that there had been some kind of accident. Not that they knew that she was being sexually abused. They don't appear to have expedited the processing to get her back with her family. Just leave her there to be preyed on multiple times. Officials didn't tell him the result of a forensic exam or the interview with his child, but the older child accused of the abuse was eventually removed from the foster setting. And he eventually says, I asked them what happened. I want to know. I'm her father. I want to know what's going on. And they just told me they couldn't give me more information, that it was under investigation. She was so long in there, I just think that if they would have moved faster, nothing like that would have happened. And that easily could have happened if they cared at all. If they cared about children, if they cared about sexual abuse, if they cared about migrants, if they cared about women or girls, if they cared about literally any of the things that they say they care about, other than just producing enough raw suffering in the world that a vortex opens up and a dark elder god comes through. I don't know. That's the only explanation I can come up with for why they perpetuate and continue so much evil on a daily basis across our country. They just don't care, JR. And I will take your advice from earlier. So when do we get them out of office?
It's the only answer. Right? It's the only answer left. Because there's no bottom. There's nothing that they're not willing to overlook and ignore. And as we see the stories of, then eventually, if people stick to it for longer than 2 days, well, eventually, I guess we'll eliminate one person and put another person that's even worse in the same position to do worse things even more so. This is how these things are working out. And again, this is why, if you hear and see about instances, uninvestigated reports, and reputable stories of people like this guy in the White House, his courts around him, his oligarchs that are surrounding him as well too, and their involvement with child sex trafficking that we still haven't got all those documents from. The reason, as they keep saying, well, how come you wasn't talking about it when Biden was in office? By the way, people who care about it were talking about it when Biden was in office, is because all these folks, they will lead their pedophilia into other avenues of our lives. Why would they care about this? This is like small potatoes compared to the things that they were involved in. The things that we're still hearing about. The things that they're not really letting out. And now that Todd Blanche is in position, has said, we're not releasing the rest of those. What's the matter with you? We've already done it all. Because when they see and hear things like this, it gets them a little bit jazzed up. As a matter of fact, they're probably happy about this. It's gotten to that point now. There's no more covering for it. It's just, yeah, this is who we are. This is the type of things that we accept. I'm sure how long before we just say, we're the terrorists, you know.
I know.
Things like that.
Again, are we the baddies? Yes, in every possible way, in every possible story. I was reading an article, we have like another minute, where like Stephen Miller had been forced to retreat because the horror of his, basically trying to set up, the concentration camps and everything was just too bad. They're still doing a lot of that stuff, of course. He's having to appear on the news a little bit less. They've done a little bit less of the invasions of the cities because they thought for some reason that gunning down nurses and stuff would be popular, and then they were shocked to find out that Americans don't actually like that, so they backed off a little bit or whatever. But it's still going on. This is the inevitable, predictable, and predicted outcome of the system that they've set up. 3-year-old.
Same things are happening. It's just they're making sure that it's not highlighted. They don't want it in the cycle. They don't want the things being put out there. So instead, we'll understand that we're at war right now. So that's something else that's a big news grabber. And not that it's working for them, but at least we're not talking about those other things. Apparently, you mentioned Stephen Miller. He's supposed to, he's apparently on thin ice because his mass deportation, rabid bloodthirst is something that Trump doesn't like. Not because of the policy, but because it doesn't look good.
Yeah. I'm gonna end by saying, I have no doubt that the father is a very reasonable person or whatever. I will just say that if it was me, I don't know what the next chapter of my life would be, and I don't know what I would do. I'm not in a position where I can come up with what that would look like, but it would be something. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, y'all, I think it's fair to say it by now. It appears like MAGA is in a full-blown crisis as Trumpism collapses right in front of their eyes. Okay, they're struggling, they're flailing, they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. They understand now that this was all a con. And it's interesting because there is a breakdown, right, where the MAGA commentators, the pundits, they seem to be the ones who are going, fuck, this was all, we've been had, right? However, it's still the case among Trump's base that there's still a cult there, bro. There's still a cult. Now, that cult, to be fair, is only about 33% of the country, right? But that's still a lot of fucking people. That's still millions and millions of people. And so there's a bit of a breakdown here where Trump still commands a cult, a death cult at that, but virtually all the MAGA commentators are running for the hills, bro. They're going, this thing's over. This thing is done. So let me walk you through more strident criticism than perhaps I think I've ever seen before among this group of people, okay? So let's start with this one. Trump, as you all know, the other day, he came out and said, open the fucking straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. And he literally said, praise be to Allah, threatening war crimes yet again against Iran, threatening to blow up power plants and bridges. By the way, they've already blown up many of those on top of schools and hospitals. The full Israelification of the U.S., where it's like, we're not even going to pretend to believe in international law anymore. We're just going to go after innocent people nonstop. So he comes out and says this, right? This was his Easter message, y'all. His Easter message was, I can't wait to bomb power plants and bridges. I can't open the fucking straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Praise Allah. Look at this. This is a deeply MAGA account here. I voted for Trump 3 times. But it's time to remove this unhinged lunatic from office before he burns the world down and gets a lot of people killed. Ladies and gentlemen, this person is a, quote, proud Christian nationalist, guerrilla fighter, anti-globalist, former America-only candidate for Kentucky State Representative. Jesus Christ is king. This is as right-wing gets. In fact, for being honest here, probably a white nationalist. And the white nationalist is going, bro, really? Really? Okay, we're not done. Former Queen of MAGA, Candace, has fully left Trump at this point. And so when we learned, Trump came out on Fox News and he said that the U.S. has been arming Iranian protesters with guns, trying to get them to violently overthrow the Iranian government, right? So he comes out and admits it, whereas other presidents are smart enough to shut the fuck up and not say that out loud. Trump just blurts it out. Candace chimes in and says, we do this in literally every country. It's standard U.S.-Israel operating procedure. Arming rebels, claiming oppressed people are freeing themselves, and then executing a regime change and stealing resources. Yep. Trump is despicable. Admitting the stealing of the resources. Now, I don't know about y'all, I've been gaslit to the high heavens by MAGA about that for so long. When I pointed out in Venezuela, like, he's not freeing them, you fucking dipshits. He's abducting Maduro illegally, kidnapping a sovereign leader, and then he's stealing Venezuela's oil, selling it on the global market, and then taking that money and putting it in a private bank account that only he controls in Qatar. That's what it's for. It's for stealing the oil. And Trump's been out there now talking about stealing the oil of Iran. He's been doing it nonstop. So now you even have Candace Owens validating what the left has been saying for so long, that, the U.S. is stealing the resources. That's the goal. That's the point. U.S. global dominance and hegemony. The U.S. corporations and the Epstein class putting their imperialist will on the rest of the world. That's what this is. So now we also have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has since broken up very seriously with MAGA over the Epstein files in particular. Well, now we get this. She's responding to Trump's psychotic Easter message where he says he's going to commit war crimes and says open the fucking strait and praise Allah. And she says this. On Easter morning, this is what President Trump posted. Everyone in his administration that claims to be a Christian needs to fall on their knees and beg forgiveness from God and stop worshiping the president and intervene in Trump's madness. I know all of you and him, and he has gone insane, and all of you are complicit. I'm not defending Iran. You should. But let's be honest about all of this. The strait is closed because the U.S. and Israel started the unprovoked war against Iran based on the same nuclear lies they've been telling for decades. That any moment Iran would develop a nuclear weapon. You know who has nuclear weapons? Israel. They are more than capable of defending themselves without the U.S. having to fight their wars, kill innocent people and children, and pay for it. Trump threatening to bomb power plants and bridges hurts the Iranian people, the very people Trump claimed he was freeing. On Easter of all days, we as Christians should be reminded that the Son of God died and rose from the grave so that we can be forgiven once and for all for our sins. Jesus commanded us to love one another and forgive one another, even our enemies. Our president is not a Christian, and his words and actions should not be supported by Christians. Christians in the administration should be pursuing peace, urging the president to make peace, not escalating war that is hurting people. This is not what we promised the American people when they overwhelmingly voted in 2024. I know, I was there more than most. This is not making America great again. This is evil. Okay, but I'm still not done, because here is a little guy who we used to call Ozempic Jones, who we can't call Ozempic Jones anymore, because he put right back on that weight, dog. He had it all for 7 seconds, then he said, fuck this, where's the beer, where's the steak, let me go to town here and put the weight right back on. Here's Alex Jones, and now he has gone total 180. Listen to this.
Yeah, forget your Medicare and Medicaid. Forget, when you have a heart attack and forget your medication. You got a war here, pal. Here it is.
Because the United States can't take care of daycare. That has to be up to a state. We can't take care of daycare. We're a big country. We have 50 states. We have all these other people. We're fighting wars. We can't take care of daycare. You got to let a state take care of daycare, and they should pay for it, too. They should pay. They have to raise their taxes. But they should pay for it. And we could lower our taxes a little bit to them to make up. But it's not possible for us to take care of daycare. Medicaid, Medicare, all these individual things, they can do it on a state basis. You can't do it on a federal. We have to take care of one thing, military protection.
Oh, military protection. Go start a war and then tell everybody, you go fix the Strait of Hormuz when Israel started it. And act like it's everybody else's problem. And yeah, these entitlements are impossible designed to bankrupt us. You got to phase them out like you said you would do and replace it. But now you're the enemy, and they're going to run that ad everywhere they already are.
Even when he's right, he can't help but be wrong. He's like, wait, no, you're right. You totally got to get a phase out. These entitlements are going to go bankrupt. Whoa. Hold on. That's not true. That's not true at all. And in fact, Trump said the opposite. He said he was going to protect Medicare and Social Security. You fucking idiot. You jackweasel. What is wrong with you? He can't. So even when he's right, he's wrong. He can't help himself. He had to take a pot shot at our social safety net programs. Like the only good thing that this country spends tax money on. He still takes a shot at it. But he goes on here. We go.
You should go start a war and then tell everybody you go fix the Strait of Hormuz when Israel started it. And act like it's everybody else's problem. And yeah, these entitlements are impossible, designed to bankrupt us. You got to phase them out like you said you would do and replace it.
To bankrupt us. They are designed.
But now you're the enemy, and they're going to run that ad everywhere they already are. Oh, thank you, Trump. More 3D chess, right?
Mocking the idea that he knows what he's doing. He has a plan. This is 3D chess. Mocking that idea. Listen, can we just come out and say it now? It's enough beating around the bush. It's enough fucking foreplay. Let's be direct. Let's be straightforward. Complete and utter domination. Total, flawless victory for the left. And I'll tell you what I'm sick and tired of. I'm sick and tired of all these right-wingers now having the come-to-Jesus moment where they realize, oh shit, Trump's a con man, Trump's a scam artist, Trump's a warmonger, Trump's everything horrible in the world. But what they do is, they'll never give credit to the left. They'll never say, you know what, you guys were fucking right, we were wrong. We're going to hold that big, fat, juicy L. That's what we're... They never do it. They never do it. In fact, what they usually do is they'll suck off other right-wingers who were slightly less wrong. This is what, like, Sneeko did, talking about Tucker Carlson. Said, props to Tucker for calling out the Iran war and actually being consistent in principle. And it's like, hey, all you fucking jackasses were on the Trump train when people on the left, like me, were warning, hey, this motherfucker is a warmonger. He's going to do more wars. And not a single one of these right-wingers goes, oh, you know what? I guess maybe we should shut the fuck up and start listening to leftists and start listening to people like Kyle, who were right about this every single fucking step of the way. They don't have it in them. They don't have it in them. And by the way, notice something there. He admitted the left was right, but also still said we should, like, phase out our social safety net program. No, bitch. How about you recognize that's bad, that's wrong, that's evil? How about you recognize that? It's like, you know, what's your gripe here? Your gripe is Trump is not doing imperialism smart enough? Trump is not doing, you know, insane, unfettered, free market extremism good enough? Like, oh, you want a more competent person who's gonna kick millions of people into poverty in this country? Is that the fucking argument?
Yep.
So, I don't know. These, they can only go so far. They can never go all the way. They can never, like, it's very rare that you get one of them just seriously holding the apologizing, saying, hey, my bad. I'm an idiot. I'm a sucker. I got. I was wrong. I was dumb. I went for a fucking ride. Kamala Harris obviously would have been better. Like, way, way better than what we're dealing with here. Will they ever have the apology moment of like, hey, you know, I noticed that when I started saying true things, I started to just steal a lot of lefty talking points. Isn't that funny how that works? The more correct you are, the further left you go. Isn't that weird? Isn't there like a message? Isn't there like a lesson in there somewhere for these people to take away? But it's happening, y'all. It is happening. And what'll be interesting to see is this. Like I said, the MAGA commentariat, yes, they are sort of falling apart. The Trump base has not followed. They're still, you know, riding Trump's tiny little meat, okay? And the question is...
Yeah, it's actually very strange. Like,
at what point does the MAGA commentariat stuff actually trickle down to the base and have it land more? And I will say this. To the extent there has been any sort of you know, an escape away from Trump among the base, I really think it's tied to shit like gas being super expensive. I actually think it has more to do with that than it has to do with the Epstein files, than it has to do with the fucking war crimes he commits on a daily basis. Because these people are fucking, they're hogs. They're selfish, right? They don't give a fuck about anybody but themselves. And so it'll finally hit them when they go, oh shit, I gotta pay an extra tax on my fucking Amazon delivery? Fuck that. Oh, my gas is fucking $4.18. Are you crazy? Hell no. That's when they go, okay, so it's that classic like American materialism. As soon as the treats go away, that's when the cult will get thinner and thinner. But right now, like I said, the low poll, we're at 33%. How low can he go? We're gonna find out because this thing's only gonna get worse, and so he's only gonna go one direction. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.
About a month ago, I made a video called "The UK is a Warning to the Rest of the World." It was about the entirely avoidable economic stagnation that overtook what was once the world's preeminent industrial power. The comment section of that video was unusually lively, but some comments really stood out. A lot of my viewers were saying some version of, just change the name of the country and you've basically described Canada. They said this, it should be noted, very politely. So today, let's talk about Canada. Now, back in 2012, a comparison like that would have seemed absurd. At that point, the global consensus on Canada was that it was the ultimate best of all worlds economy. It had the natural resources of a Gulf state, the social safety net of a Northern European country, and a housing market that only seemed to move in one direction. Canada is a country that on paper should be one of the wealthiest nations on earth. It has the second largest landmass in the world. It holds the third largest proven oil reserves. It's fifth in natural gas. It has an abundance of uranium, potash, rare earth minerals, and fresh water. It has a highly educated population, a stable democracy, rule of law, and G7 membership. By every measure of endowment, Canada should be a superpower. In fact, there was a brief window in 2012 where the median Canadian household actually pulled ahead of its American counterpart, becoming by several measures the most affluent middle class in the world. Looking back from 2026, it's clear that this outperformance was driven by a unique set of circumstances. It was the height of a global commodity boom where crude oil prices had nearly quadrupled over a decade, and the Canadian dollar was trading at or above parity with the US dollar. While high energy prices were a headwind for the US, they were a massive tailwind for Canada. But if you look at the data today, that era of outperformance has vanished. The decline isn't marked by a sudden collapse or a dramatic crisis. It's a slow, but always polite stagnation. Between 2012 and today, Canada has fallen from number 6 on the World Happiness Index to number 25, its lowest ranking since the survey began. To see a national mood sour this quickly, you usually have to look at countries whose central banks have been replaced by printing presses or whose borders are being redrawn. In Canada, the institutions are still there and the borders haven't moved. It's just that the arithmetic of a middle-class life has slowly stopped balancing. National income per head has fallen from roughly 80% of the American level in the decade before the pandemic to around 70% today. If Canadian provinces were American states, Alberta, the oil-rich outlier, would rank around 20th wealthiest, somewhere between Colorado and Tennessee. Ontario, Canada's most populous and economically central province, would rank 48th, below Montana, below Alabama, and below every southern state except Mississippi. New Brunswick would rank dead last, below Mississippi. The provinces that contain most of Canada's population sit near the bottom of the combined list. A country that was briefly richer per capita than the United States is now having a serious debate about whether it can arrest a generational decline. The British disease that I described last month was an object lesson in compounding errors, but Canada's version of this stagnation is unique. It's a story of how a country with every possible advantage managed to fall into what Bank of Canada Senior Deputy Governor Caroline Rogers called, in a 2024 speech, a productivity emergency. The reason I think the rest of the world should pay attention to Canada is not that Canada is failing spectacularly. It is failing gradually, systematically, and in ways that are entirely legible. Compounding errors that reinforce each other, each one individually defensible, collectively ruinous. The same patterns are visible in countries across the developed world. Canada just got there first. So let's go through them, but before we do, let me tell you about this week's video sponsor, GenSpark AI. You've already loved GenSpark 2.0 with Super Agent, AI Office Suite, and AI Media Agents.
But now it's evolved into GenSpark 3.0, your ultimate all-in-one AI workspace. It comes with 3 game-changing features you won't want to miss. First, it enables wooden themes, but Spark's graphics to chat and AI experiment win every year. Professional to give it a go. Consider a thought experiment. Imagine a professional sports league where the same 3 or 4 teams win every year. They have the largest stadiums, the biggest TV deals, and the most expensive players. The other teams are technically allowed to compete, but the rules of the game have been structured over the decades to make it very difficult for anyone new to enter. What tends to happen over time is not just that the incumbents win, it's that the whole quality of play declines. Without genuine competitive pressure, there's no incentive to innovate, to take risks, or to improve. Canada's domestic economy has, in several of its most important sectors, been running this kind of league for 30 years. Take telecommunications. Canada has 3 dominant carriers, Bell, Rogers, and TELUS, who collectively hold roughly 89% of wireless subscribers. Canada has, as a result, some of the highest mobile phone bills in the developed world. A comparable unlimited data plan costs roughly twice as much in Canada as in the UK or France. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, or the CRTC, which is what you'd call it if you like to get home before midnight, has for years been theoretically open to new entrants. But the practical and regulatory barriers have ensured that meaningful competition never quite materialized. The industry has spent lavishly on lobbying and regulatory intervention. It spent rather less on network investment per customer than its counterparts in more competitive markets. Banking tells a similar story. 5 Canadian banks, the Royal Bank, TD, Scotiabank, BMO, and CIBC, hold approximately 90% of deposits in the country. The Canadian banking system is, by design, highly stable. It didn't have a financial crisis in 2008, unlike most of the developed world. This is a genuine achievement, and Canadian bankers will remind you of it at every available opportunity. But stability and dynamism are not the same thing. A concentrated banking sector allocates capital conservatively. It lends to proven assets, existing real estate, established corporations, rather than to new ventures. The startup ecosystem that Canada has quietly built, particularly in AI, has often found that the most growth-oriented capital came from American funds, not from Bay Street. The pattern repeats in airlines, in groceries, and in broadcasting. A small number of large incumbents protected by ownership restrictions, regulatory capture, or both, extract returns from a captive domestic market. The economist's term for this is rent-seeking. The polite Canadian term is a stable industry. The consequence is that Canada's labour productivity, the output generated per hour worked, has declined relative to American productivity over time. In 1997, the productivity gap was narrower. Since then, the two economies have diverged by a cumulative 26 percentage points. Canada has not become less productive in absolute terms, it simply failed to keep pace with an economy where competitive pressure is significantly higher and where venture capital has directed hundreds of billions of dollars into the highest productivity sectors of the global economy. Canada spends less than half the OECD average on research and development as a share of GDP, a figure that has been below the average for 2 decades running. There's also the question of internal trade. Canada has a free trade agreement with the United States, Mexico, the European Union, and most of Asia Pacific. It does not have a fully functioning free trade agreement with itself, a structural curiosity that has persisted in various forms since Confederation. In January 2005, the average Canadian home sold for $237,000 Canadian dollars. By early 2026, the average had reached $661,000, a nominal increase of around 179%, or nearly tripling in price. Even adjusted for inflation, the gain is still huge. In the country's largest cities, it's been transformational. Now, there's a common comparison made in conversations about Canadian housing that homes have outperformed the stock market over time. It's worth pausing on this. On a straight price appreciation basis, the TSX Composite Index actually outperformed Canadian housing over the same period, and substantially so once dividends are reinvested. The point is not, therefore, that housing beats stocks. The point is that housing performed like an equity investment in a non-productive asset. A company, when it rises in value, has generally done so by producing something, a product, a service, a patent, a drug, a piece of software. The stock price reflects real economic activity, real production. A house, when it rises in value, has generally done so because land in a desirable location has become scarcer, because planning restrictions have constrained supply, or because a decade of historically low interest rates created a wall of capital seeking somewhere to go. The house didn't invent anything. It didn't employ a research team. It just sat there. This distinction matters because of leverage. If you bought a Toronto home in 2005 for $300,000 with a 20% deposit, so $60,000 down, and that home is now worth around $900,000, your original $60,000 has generated a capital gain of $600,000. That is a 10-to-1 return on the actual cash invested. It's also, in Canada, entirely tax-free if it was your primary residence. If you had instead taken that same $60,000 and put it into a TSX index fund, it would be worth roughly $195,000 today. A solid result, but it gets diluted because of capital gains tax on the profit. The incentive structure this creates is problematic. The rational economic choice for a Canadian household with savings has been for 20 years to put as much money as possible into real estate as early as possible at as high a leverage ratio as your bank will allow. This is not irrational behavior, it's an entirely logical response to the incentives that the system created. It is, after all, how everyone you know made most of their money. The consequences of this are considerable. Housing prices in Canada's major cities now sit at somewhere between 12 and 17 times median household income. The median after-tax income for a Canadian individual in 2023 was $74,000 a year. At the national average price of $661,000, the price-to-income ratio is approximately 9. In Toronto and Vancouver, it's substantially higher. In 2020 and 2021, CIBC estimated that roughly one-third of first-time buyers received a parental gift to fund their down payment. The average amount was 82,000 Canadian dollars, which, as it happens, is slightly more than the median Canadian individual's annual after-tax income. In Vancouver, the average parental gift was 180,000 Canadian dollars. In Toronto, it exceeded $130,000. The Bank of Mom and Dad has in certain Canadian cities become the largest mortgage lender in the country. It doesn't, however, publish accounts. Amusingly, in researching this, I found a Canadian real estate industry publication where the author argued that what Canada's housing market needed was further tax relief for property owners on the grounds that this would stimulate more housing transactions. I don't like to beat up on someone, but consider the environment in which it's being made. The average home in Vancouver costs more than 17 times the average income. The suggested solution is to make property ownership even more tax advantaged than it already is. This is a bit like a doctor seeing a patient with high blood pressure and suggesting that they eat more salt. Technically, it will do something, it's just not obvious that the something is helpful. The political economy of this situation is almost perfectly paralleled. Approximately 66% of Canadian households own their own homes, meaning that 2/3 of the electorate have a direct financial stake in keeping house prices high. A government that credibly committed to building sufficient new housing to return prices to something resembling affordability would be asking a majority of its voters to accept a substantial reduction in the value of their single largest asset. In Britain, we identified this as the central political obstacle to housing reform. In Canada, the problem is essentially identical. The 2026 World Happiness Report contains a data point that I find genuinely striking. Canada overall ranks 25th, which is a significant fall from 6th a decade ago, but still a respectable position for a country that is, by any objective standard, wealthy, peaceful, and well-governed. But when you break this down by age, the picture changes substantially. Canadians over 60 rank in the global top 10 for happiness. Canadians under 25 rank 71st. 71st, below countries with a fraction of Canada's per capita income. That ranking reflects not just where Canada stands, but how fast it has fallen. The World Happiness Report tracks the decline in youth happiness since 2011 across 136 countries. Of those, only 3 recorded a steeper drop than Canada: Malawi, Lebanon, and Afghanistan. One of the 3 has a poverty rate above 70%. One has been in active armed conflict. One is governed by the Taliban. Canada is the 4th. There's a clean explanation for this divergence, and it is the housing market. Older Canadians who bought homes in the 1980s, 1990s, or early 2000s have, through the entirely normal process of sitting in their houses, accumulated wealth that would have been the envy of a successful entrepreneur. The median senior family in Canada holds net assets of approximately 1.1 million Canadian dollars. The median family, where the main earner is under 35, holds approximately $159,000. This is not because young Canadians are less capable, less hardworking, or less disciplined. It's because the asset that generated extraordinary returns for the previous generation is now priced at a level that makes it structurally inaccessible without either a very high income, a parental transfer, or both. Youth unemployment reached 14.7% in late 2025. Approximately 914,000 young Canadians, just under a million, were classified as NEET, not in employment, education, or training. This is the mechanism of generational wealth transfer that the housing market has created. It's not a conspiracy. Nobody designed it this way. It's simply the predictable outcome of a set of policies, planning restrictions, tax treatment of primary residents, mortgage incentives, and low interest rates that happen to be extremely good for people who owned assets 25 years ago and are considerably less good for people trying to acquire assets today. It also, incidentally, explains why the country's most talented young people increasingly look south. Which brings me briefly to Elon Musk. Elon Musk was born in South Africa. At 17, he moved to Canada, where he held citizenship through his mother, and stayed for approximately 2 years before relocating to the United States. He's now variously the world's richest person, the owner of Twitter, which he acquired for $44 billion and renamed X, and a figure of considerable political controversy in the country that eventually kept him. I bring him up not as evidence of Canada's loss, but because of the underlying pattern. Talented individual arrives in Canada, acquires residency, departs for the United States for better economic opportunities. There's nothing really unusual about this story. It is, in fact, the dominant finding of the July 2025 Statistics Canada study on skilled emigration. The study found that roughly 22,000 to 35,000 Canadians move to the United States each year. More striking, about 60% of those applying for US work authorization from Canada are not Canadian born at all. They're skilled immigrants who came to Canada first and subsequently moved on. The median US salary offer for these individuals was $137,000, primarily in computer, mathematical, and engineering fields. Canada attracted them, educated them in some cases, and then lost them to a market that paid more and taxed less. The Conference Board has called this the leaky bucket problem. Canada has one of the world's most generous immigration systems. It brings in large numbers of highly educated people, but 1 in 5 skilled immigrants leaves within 25 years, with the highest attrition in the first 5 years, precisely when they're the most economically mobile and most likely to be comparing their Canadian prospects to their alternatives. Canada is not, on this evidence, suffering from a brain drain in the classic sense. It's functioning as a very efficient talent incubator for the United States economy, which is a service, I suppose, just not one that Canada intended to provide. Since 1997, Canadian labour productivity has fallen progressively behind that of the United States. The cumulative gap is now approximately 26 percentage points. To put that in terms that I think are more intuitive, for every dollar of output generated by an American worker in an hour, a Canadian worker generates roughly 74 cents. This is not a story about working less. Hours worked per Canadian are broadly comparable to those in the United States. It's a story about where those hours have been directed. The economy has channeled its investment, human, financial, and physical, into sectors that produce lower output per unit of effort. Real estate, public administration, retail, and the financial sector that lends against bricks rather than ideas. Canada's business investment in research and development as a share of GDP has been below the OECD average for 20 consecutive years. The gap between Canadian and American R&D spending per capita is large and widening. A country that doesn't invest in the production of new knowledge or new processes eventually finds that its workers are doing the same things in the same ways as a generation ago, which is roughly what has happened. There is a further structural point worth making about the composition of the workforce. Between 2015 and 2025, public sector employment in Canada grew by approximately 30%. I'm not arguing that public servants don't provide valuable services. Many of them do. It's just worth noting that a growing share of the highest security employment in Canada is in sectors that do not, by definition, produce exportable goods or generate productivity growth in the conventional sense. The Bank of Canada's most recent forecast for real economic growth is 1.25% annually. For an economy with Canada's endowments, that is unimpressive. Approximately 75% of Canada's exports go to the United States. For reference, total merchandise exports to the US represent roughly 1/3 of Canadian GDP. No other developed economy is so comprehensively tethered to a single trading partner. This concentration was, for a very long time, a reasonable arrangement. The United States was a stable, rules-based market. The two countries shared a border, a language, a legal tradition, and a broadly aligned foreign policy. NAFTA and later the USMCA provided a framework of predictability. Canadian businesses rationally chose not to spend money developing Asian or European market access when the American market was so large, so close, and so accessible. The problem with concentrating your economic exposure to a single counterparty is that you're entirely dependent on that counterparty's goodwill and continuity of policy. Recent events have illustrated this risk with some emphasis. Nowhere is Canada's strategic exposure more visible than in energy. Canada holds the world's third largest proven oil reserves, the vast majority in the Alberta oil sands. The United States is the overwhelmingly dominant customer. Because Canada has historically lacked sufficient tidewater export infrastructure to access Asian or European markets, it has sold oil at a consistent discount to the global benchmark price. WCS is a heavy sour crude, more expensive to refine than the lighter American benchmark, and some discount is structurally warranted. But the historical gap of $15 to $20 per barrel was consistently larger than the quality differential alone would justify. The excess reflects a transportation premium that accrued not to Canada but to the American Midwest refiners, who, for decades, were the only buyers with ready access. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion entered commercial service in May 2024. It added approximately 590,000 barrels per day of capacity, bringing total Trans Mountain capacity to around 890,000 barrels per day. The WCS-WTI discount has narrowed since then, from roughly $19.82 to around $12.52 per barrel. This is progress. The pipeline cost approximately 34 billion Canadian dollars to build, against an original 2012 estimate of 5.4 billion Canadian dollars. That is a cost overrun of roughly 530%. It remains one of the more spectacular infrastructure project management failures in recent Canadian history. But it is built and it is moving oil to tidewater. The more interesting counterfactual is Energy East. Energy East was a proposed 4,600 kilometer pipeline that would have carried 1.1 million barrels per day from Alberta to St. John, New Brunswick. The Canaport terminal at St. John had already received 300 million Canadian dollars in upgrades and can accommodate supertankers, much larger vessels than those serviced by the Vancouver terminus. Energy East would have opened Atlantic and European markets in addition to Asian ones. It was cancelled in October 2017 following years of regulatory review, shifting political winds and organised opposition. Several Canadians I spoke to in researching this video described the cancellation as the single most consequential strategic error in recent Canadian economic history. Canada also has internal trade barriers that function, according to the IMF, like a 6.9% tariff on domestic commerce. A wine producer in British Columbia cannot easily sell to a restaurant in Ontario. A construction worker licensed in Alberta may need to re-qualify to work in Quebec. A medical device cleared in one province requires reapproval in another. Eliminating these barriers, which has the support of 95% of Canadians, according to polling by Angus Reid, could, according to various estimates, add between 90 billion and 200 billion per year to GDP. This has been known for decades, but the barriers remain. On the topic of trade balance, Canada runs a goods trade surplus with the United States, but it runs an overall current account deficit when you include services and investment income. This distinction matters because Canada is sometimes characterized in trade discussions as a surplus economy in the Chinese mold. This is not accurate. Canada runs structural deficits in services, in tourism, in intellectual property, in financial services that offset its goods surplus. Canada is, in aggregate, a net importer. It is not a mercantilist economy systematically accumulating foreign reserves at the expense of its trading partners. It's a country that sells raw materials and manufactures less than it buys. I've spent the better part of this video cataloging what's gone wrong. In the interest of intellectual honesty, I should spend some time on what is not. The FT's Tej Parikh, in two pieces that I would recommend to anyone thinking seriously about Canada's economic position, makes a point that I think is underappreciated. Canada's endowments are extraordinary. It has the resources, the institutions, the human capital, and the geographic position to to be not merely a well-functioning mid-sized economy, but as Parikh puts it, a genuine economic superpower. Canada's endowments, as I described at the outset, are extraordinary, the kind that most countries would consider a permanent structural advantage. What's less well understood is the institutional capital that sits alongside them. The Maple 8, Canada's 8 largest pension funds, collectively manage around 1.6 trillion Canadian dollars in assets. They are amongst the most sophisticated institutional investors in the world. If structured as a sovereign wealth fund, they would be the 3rd largest in the world. Canada's university system produces, by international standards, excellent graduates. A 2025 survey suggested that approximately 17 million university-educated people globally would choose to move to Canada if they could. Canada's AI research ecosystem, centered on Montreal, Toronto, and the Vector Institute, is genuinely world-class. Jeffrey Hinton, Yoshua Bengio, and Richard Sutton, 3 of the most consequential figures in the development of modern AI, all did their foundational work in Canada. The country has something real to build on. Canada also hosts the G7's lowest net debt to GDP ratio and deficit as a share of the economy. Its fiscal position is, relative to peers, a genuine strength, which means that it has the capacity to invest if it chooses to. The question is whether external pressure might finally produce the internal reforms that domestic politics have persistently failed to deliver. There is some reason to think that it might. The trade tensions of recent years have created in Canada a political consensus around economic self-sufficiency that was absent for most of the last 3 decades. The internal trade barrier discussion, which has been a polite academic conversation for decades, suddenly became urgent. The pipeline question acquired new political salience. Parikh's phrase that Canada has spent too long being a client state and branch plant economy of the United States, which would have been controversial to say even 5 years ago, is now being quoted in the House of Commons. The case for optimism, then, is not that Canada will automatically get better. It's that the conditions that might force it to try, external shock, generational transfer of political power, a recognition that the status quo is no longer sustainable, are, for the first time in a generation, in place simultaneously. Crises, as it turns out, are occasionally useful. If you found this interesting, you should watch my video on the UK next. The structural parallels are fascinating. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, GenSpark AI, using the link in the video description. And see you in the next video. Bye.
Are the hearings that are happening tomorrow? It's not going to be a decision tomorrow. The hearings in front of the Supreme Court on birthright citizenship. And this is actually something I know a whole heck of a lot about. I've written about it before. I will write about it again in the future. But let me just give you a quick and dirty here of what is going on with the fight over birthright citizenship. There has never been any question that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution provides that anybody who is born in the United States of America or in territories that are controlled by it. So I think it was John McCain was actually born in Panama when his father was doing something around the Panama Canal. That's in the back of my mind.
I've seen this video. Clear you. You know what? Fuck it. I haven't watched this Aladdin video yet. It's been in my feed forever.
Well, it finally happened. I knew this day was coming. I had 2 girls who were very close in age. It was always going to happen, especially when one day Grandma woke up and chose violence and, decided to need it on and Elsa costumes. I would try to introduce other movies like, hey, how about this one? It's got doggies in it. Or, hey, how about this one? It's got doggies in it. Yeah, never mind. But none of those really liberated us from the yoke of Frozen until Aladdin, and I was like, oh. Because Frozen, like, it's not bad. You know, it's fine. But when you watch it over and over again, the flaws become very glaring, especially if you know the production history. The seams become very obvious.
Am I right? Hi.
I don't want to build a snowman. Okay, bye. But revisiting Aladdin as an adult brings up a whole different set of emotions, prominent among which being yikes.
Do you know what the penalty is for sinning?
Remember when they had these, like, sorry about our racism placards on Disney Plus? You know, like, this movie contains some outdated stereotypes. Sorry about that. You know, enjoy your movie. Okay. They don't do that anymore. Weird. I wonder why. So I want to state from the outset that this is not your favorite problematic takedown. You know, Aladdin is good. We like Aladdin. But, you know, it did get me thinking about a lot of things, like how do we contextualize depictions of the Middle East, especially in our current climate, especially when the kids are super young. I didn't say it'd be easy. But Aladdin's cultural stuff is not the only thing it has been accused of appropriating. See, Aladdin has its own plagiarism controversy, that the film borrowed, if not outright stole, designs, techniques, and concepts from another film, and that Disney, by its head of animation's own admission, took the best from this film before then deliberately burying it. This film being, of course, Richard Williams' masterpiece, his word not mine, The Thief and the Cobbler.
Oh, no man can pick it, no matter how great. Yes, he possesses these 3 balls of fate.
I kind of walked into this assuming that the answer would be a did the Lion King rip off Kimba the White Lion situation where the answer is an unequivocal no, but in this case, it is actually a little complicated. Whether or not you cast Disney as the sole villain or have a more nuanced take, there's this movement to recast Richard Williams as this tragic figure who was plagiarized by Disney and then had his life's work, his magnum opus, ripped from him and destroyed his life. And this narrative about this film is a very popular topic on, you know, animation talk, animation tube.
Discussion right here for dramatic. A movie that a lot of us cherish was actually a complete ripoff of another movie.
Disney had the money, the power, and the marketing machine to finish theirs first. And Williams, who was notoriously a perfectionist, was never going to beat them to the line.
The princess ends up breaking her shoe and telling the Sultan, hey daddy, I need a cobbler to save his life. Kind of very similar to when Jasmine protected Aladdin against Jafar when Jafar wanted him in prison for kidnapping.
What? So videos like this do get a lot of details wrong, but again, it's not a simple cut and dry thing, it's complicated. Richard Williams was a Canadian animator who worked out of London for most of his career. He was most well known for the iconic opening titles to the Pink Panther series, The Bottomlessly Creepy Raggedy Ann and Andy movie, and directing the animation for Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
How can I ever repay
He started his animation studio in the early 1960s and began work on the project that would become The Thief and the Cobbler in 1964 when he was 31 years old. The Thief and the Cobbler is the story of... This movie doesn't have the most cohesive narrative. There is a thief who does not have a name.
Thief. Who shall be nameless.
There's a cobbler, and he does have a name.
Tack? Is that your name? Tack?
They cross paths at points during the movie. There's a princess who wants to help her kingdom. There's a bad guy who doesn't seem to have much of a plan until the thief does a stupid thing for thief reasons. And there are other unrelated bad guys, and you know, they're coming. They're like George Washington, they're coming.
Opponents beware, opponents beware. He's coming, he's coming, he's coming.
And golden balls.
That is the 3 golden balls. Whatever taken away, harmony will yield to discord.
The city will fall if the balls drop. The city will fall if the balls drop. And the thief steals the ball. I didn't write this part.
Get those balls. Balls. I'm taking my balls and leaving.
The Bad Wizard, played by Vincent Price, who before this, I guess, had no plan. Well, he sees this as an opportunity to espionage his way into getting the bad guys. You know, they're coming, and they're an army of barbarians, and they make the Persians from 300 look sensitive. And the balls have dropped, so they're going to attack the city while the balls have dropped. So the Bad Wizard can rule and marry the king's daughter, Princess Yum Yum. Princess Yum Yum and the cobbler, and they try to stop him, and they do. And that's the movie. I did not begin writing this video with the intent to make a Thief and the Cobbler takedown piece. I do not want to make that. That is not my intent. Again, Richard Williams was a highly skilled guy, and this is a sad story, but the tragic backstory of this film may have led to it being a touch overrated.
I love you.
I love you.
First, I hate the Thief. The Thief would work in a 5-minute Looney Tune, a lesser 5-minute Looney Tune. If the Thief has a million haters, I'm among them. If the Thief has no haters, it means I am dead. Hate the Thief. Hate. Just call it the cops. The version that was released in the US as Arabian Night in 1995 is the official one, if you can call it that. But fans have been trying to reconstruct the intended vision for years now, with periodic improvements being updated on YouTube as the recobbled cut. Every few years or so, the plot between versions really doesn't vary that much. But for all intents and purposes, the recobbled cut is the one we're going to talk about today. I can see where film nerds and animation people are obsessed with this movie. In an age where the film industry can now crank out an average of 2.8 million movies in a year, we take for granted just how laborious hand-drawn animation is. And with Thief and the Cobbler, like every 5 minutes there's some mind-bending set piece happening, or some intensely detailed bit of character animation.
Oh, beautiful, like playing cards, and I control the hex.
There is no CGI in this movie, not even computer-assisted animation like in The Great Mouse Detective. And this all requires such a high-level mastery of timing and perspective and motion, and to be done by so few people with no digital assistance is incredible. And this film was drawn in 24 frames per second, when most animation at the time was produced at 12 frames per second, including Disney. As a technical exercise, it is a paean to the art form. But as a narrative...
If the scene would work out nicely, if you just make it longer. I think the Dying Soldier started off in a 15-second shot or something, and started with a 20-second shot, then 30 seconds, and ended up a minute long. And it's one of those things where he would see the lines and say, this is just too nice to stop it here, and then extend it. And that happened to many scenes.
You know how Deadhead has this really dedicated fan base, and they say it's for the musicianship, but like, I don't know, man, I'm not here to listen to a 45-minute version of Dark Star.
Something!
I'm sure the drums are very good. Famously, this film was in production for 28 years before it was going from Williams' control in 1992, the same year Aladdin came out. Very suspicious timing. But this was not all he was working on during that time. Williams took on a ton of work, basically to bring in revenue to finance The Thief and the Cobbler. Commercials, features, segments for features. He even won an Oscar at one point.
Today, Christmas Day! It's Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day.
And then, in the 1980s, he got his biggest payday for his studio yet. So, I'm coming into this with a second bias. I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Easily top 5 all time for me. Give me one of those, I'd rather be watching bumper stickers. If you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, why are you watching this when you could be watching Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Williams, who served as the director of animation for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, oversaw a team of hundreds, including 2 of his children, and created characters including Roger Rabbit, his wife Jessica, and Baby Herman. Question for 80s and 90s kids, how old were you when you realized that Roger Rabbit was an original character, and not like a Golden Age character like Bugs Bunny or Tom and Jerry, who had been licensed for this film? Tom and Jerry got a movie, Roger Rabbit got a movie. Cool. There will be moments in Who Framed Roger Rabbit when you can see the man behind the curtain, so to speak. But they are few and far between. The blending of animation and live action is mostly pretty seamless. I find the ADR in this movie way more distracting than the attempts to blend animation and live action.
But tell me, Eddie, is that a red copy? You just have to see it.
Oh wow, that's so bad.
Got comedy to listen very hard.
Why is the sound mixing in this movie so bad? So the Walt Disney Company produced this movie. This was a Disney production. But Walt Disney Animation did not do the animation. Because they couldn't. In the mid-80s, Disney Animation was on the verge of shuttering after the failure of The Black Cauldron. And it probably would have shuttered but for The Great Mouse Detective, which was in production during the Eisner-Katzenberg regime change. And, it did fine. And this despite Katzenberg borderline sabotaging the film, story for another day. There was serious brain drain going on at the studio. Tim Burton left to go do live action, Don Bluth poached half the animation department and started his own studio, which staged Disney for half the 80s. And this was such a blow to the studio that they had to push back the release of The Fox and the Hound for 6 months. Disney Animation did not have the staff or the technical know-how to do what was needed for Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 1987. So, this is where Richard Williams was brought in. Williams directed Roger Rabbit in London, while Disney Animation made Oliver and Company in LA. But these were not cordoned-off productions. Future producer Beauty and the Beast Don Hahn and in-house Disney animators like Nick Ranieri, Phil Niblink, and Andreas Deja moved to London to work on Roger Rabbit. A lot of people who would be Disney Renaissance animators were directly exposed to animation timing, weight, and motion physics, complex perspective animation, and, of course, in-progress rough cuts of The Thief and the Cobbler. So, the production of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, despite not being done in-house per se, hugely changed the culture within Disney Animation. After Roger Rabbit, Disney poached animators from Williams like James Baxter, who went on to create and animate characters like Belle and Rafiki, and Eric Goldberg, who also worked for Williams and went on to direct everyone's non-problematic fave Pocahontas. It's interesting to see how Disney Animation changed after the Roger Rabbit era as well. You can see attempts being made poorly to emulate what Williams was doing. Here in Oliver and Company, for instance, here again, here in The Little Mermaid, but by this point they were already getting better at it. By Beauty and the Beast, they basically figured it out. The difference in the mastery of perspective between Oliver and Company and Beauty and the Beast is a lot. And the thing about Roger Rabbit, Williams initially didn't want to do it. To quote Williams in 1988, the initial feeling I had about the picture was that it would look a bit gimmicky. The problem was how to ensure the cartoons didn't make the live action look false, like a flat Tony the Tiger surrounded by live action people. So the legend goes, Williams took on the project not just to use the money he would make from Roger Rabbit to help finish The Thief and the Cobbler, but because Disney and Spielberg promised him that they would acquire and distribute the finished film, a promise that they quickly reneged on so that they could steal his idea and make their own Thief and the Cobbler, Aladdin, which would of course bury Williams' movie. Pretty evil. I'm not going to try to debunk this notion that Williams influenced the Disney animators. Like, of course he did. That was the intent. That was the whole point. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was the most successful animated-ish movie of the 1980s by a lot. It made more than double what The Little Mermaid did. It was the second highest grossing movie of its year after Rain Man. So I guess the question here is, when does inspiration cross the line into imitation and eventually into theft? Especially when you are well aware that this guy that you like and respect so much is working on a movie that is set in a very similar setting with the same inspirations and has a lot of similar aesthetics. Zigzag, the Evil Wizard's design bears a striking resemblance to Jafar, Princess Yum. Let's go, girls. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to say Princess Yum Yum in this video. I haven't even touched on the most yikes stuff yet, so Princess Yum Yum's design and outfit, making Aladdin a thief when he isn't in 1001 Nights. Zigzag and Jafar both have bird sidekicks. The Sultans are both beardy guys wearing white. They both have chase scene. That one gets cited a lot, but I think it's pretty weak. Like, the chase scene in Thief looks nothing like the one in Aladdin. Much better case to be made for, like, bouncing off of awnings. Hey, Oliver and Company does that too. Most of the design choices in Aladdin can be easily explained away by both films being inspired by the same Orientalist tropes and source material such as the 1942 film The Thief of Baghdad. But more importantly, the 1001 Nights, which is where the original Aladdin story comes from. The Thief and the Cobbler is not based on any one story in the 1001 Nights. It's a totally original story. Tack is an OC. The 1001 Nights, which you may know as Arabian Nights, it's a pretty complex text, and it's very long, and I'm not going to even try to go into any depth on it. In short, it is a collection of oral histories written down for a Western audience, with the framing device where the young Queen Sherazade, she brings her new murder husband out of the darkness of crazy, he'd been in murdering all of his previous wives, with the power of...
what kind of... I don't understand why.
I dig it, I like it, I love the good, I can change him. The stories themselves are rooted in oral traditions from all over the place, from West Asia to Central Asia to South Asia to North Africa, everywhere. But the version that we know of is extremely westernized through a specifically Victorian lens. If the Brothers Grimm is Europe's main fairy tale Bible, the 1001 Nights is our Middle Eastern fairy tale Bible. Come on. Any kind of fable or fantasy tale old that's popular in the West, it was in the 1001 Nights. There was a TV miniseries produced by Disney that came out in 2000, and that one's pretty good. It's also a lot closer to the source material, like the Aladdin segment takes place in China, Aladdin is Chinese, like he's supposed to be. There are two genies, both played by John Leguizamo.
Who are you? I'm the genie of the ring. Who else? Look! Stamp of authenticity.
We forget how popular this sort of Arabian/1001 Nights style fantasy was before 2001. I remember watching this anime version of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves all the time in some like fairy tale collection, or maybe it was on Nick Jr. all the time. I don't remember. I was like 3.
Once upon a time, in the faraway land of Persia, the people lived happy and peaceful lives.
The girl chipmunks in the Alvin and the Chipmunks movie were promised as child brides to a sheep.
How powerful he is. How rich he is. Even if the Republicans blow up the filibuster and pass the SAVE Act.
Wow, okay. I took the 3-year-old to the El Capitan Theater the other day, to watch Oliver and Company, or try to. But that theater is right in front of Hollywood High School, which very proudly wants you to know that when you are in Hollywood, you are in sheep territory. Yikes. I'm sorry, I love Rudy Valentino. That movie has everything wrong with it, but I love the movie. I love book 2, I'm sorry. Please don't change it Hollywood High. It's yikes, but stay sheep territory. We want it to be sheep territory.
Undemocratic.
Anyway, the 80s and 90s, we were walking like an Egyptian and all the stuff in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Made up.
I Dream of Genie was having a big popularity resurgence in the 80s and 90s, and I don't think it's a huge stretch to say that both Princess Yum Yum and Princess Jasmine borrow elements of their design from I Dream of Genie. 1001 Nights/Arabian Nights inspired fantasy were pretty popular before 2001, and then, I don't know, for some reason they just weren't. Didn't see a lot of that anymore. I don't know. So I guess now's as good a time as any to bring in everyone's favorite Palestinian Silver Fox, Edward Said. Look at this.
Can get in the way of cinema proceedings too. It's like it's gone both ways.
Why isn't there more Edward Said first trap content? Said is considered the father of post-colonial studies and coined the term Orientalism. And per Said, all of the above are pretty overt examples of Orientalism. And what a time in world events to be talking about this. Was not my plan.
Yeah. Dude is
Once upon a time, in the faraway land of Persia, the people lived happy and peaceful lives.
I almost kept this video on Nebula, because all these people whining on Instagram like, why aren't you making like that? I do, it's on Nebula. If you want to watch me talk about whether or not Matt Stone and Trey Parker are going to burn in hell forever, you gotta go to Nebula for that. Anyway, it was Said's influence, which is why we now say Asian or Middle Eastern instead of Oriental. And it was also Said's influence who partially led to the decline in popularity of this whole aesthetic. So I don't think it's fair to say Aladdin falls victim to Orientalist tropes and The Thief and the Cobbler does not. Princess Yum Yum has the same name as the protagonist from from Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado from the 1800s.
Whether or not he is
Peak Orientalism for Said's reading. Aladdin employs layers of Orientalism that arguably range from benign to reinforcing harmful and dangerous stereotypes about the Middle East, namely Agrabah being, more violent than other Disney fantasy universes, and it has child poverty, which, nowhere else does.
I don't think he's
dismemberment. Except maybe Snow White. That universe does have poverty and dismemberment.
We're gonna have bacon bullets.
You gotta be careful. I don't want to imply Aladdin is why we made Iran. It only partially is. But the Thief in the Cobbler not only has all of that, but also.
The federal government was like that.
And now,
The joke that went around. I think it might
Little Black Simba, wait, Christ, what are you doing, movie? What is this?
I've searched the world and brought events that noted have done great experience. A blade from far south of Gaza.
Muslims can't eat pork. They can't touch pork. It's unclean.
Mombasa.
This is the actual face I'm making. This is not a takedown. I know I said this would be a takedown. This movie, it shouldn't. So it is worth noting that while we never actually see the woman from Mombasa, the Sultan is sleepily groping her throughout the movie, at least until he starts screaming about his balls dropping.
The balls are gone!
We can't talk about iffy Orientalism without talking about Zigzag, or especially Jafar.
In order, Princess Mary. I've ordered a big You're so old.
And in terms of influence, the best case, in my opinion, to be made of direct design inspiration is Jafar. As long as we're admitting to liking all the horrible things, I love Jafar. I love the Sheik. Give me all of your problematic villainous Middle Eastern characters played by white guys. I love that his name is Jafar. Not a common name in the U.S. Ooh, scary. But like in Iran, a country with how many people?
99. Okay. Yeah, I did not know that.
Thank you, Mr. Broken Clock. It would be like, like being named Dennis. At least Zigzag has a weird name. Jafar is over here like. Yeah. Okay, so Jafar might be my favorite character in Aladdin.
I think it's time to say goodbye to Prince Abu.
Like, I know we all love Disney villains, but Jafar, he's the only one where you're like, yeah, he's kind of right.
Now, long tails of toys.
We need a 20 minutes of the Sultan already. I like Zigzag too. I'm always a sucker for anything with Vincent Price.
Thank you.
I like that he has too many fingers. I like that he speaks in rhyme. Except for that rhyme. I would like him a lot more if he fit in his own movie's narrative. He's not the one who makes the balls drop. He's not the big bad that needs to get defeated. He's just kind of being dragged along in the narrative. Same as Tack. Zigzag is fun, but he's no Professor Radigan. Literal king.
An even grimmer plot has been simmering in my great criminal brain.
There are 3 songs in that movie, and Vincent Price gets to sing 2 of them.
Goodbye, so soon, and isn't this a crime?
Kids love songs. And by kids, I mean me. One of the more common criticisms about Jafar/Zigzag is it looks just like him. One is clearly cribbed from the other.
Let's be real. It's basically an identical version of Jafar's character.
And I can't really prove a negative here. Andreas Deja, the animator for Jafar, was one of the people who worked with Williams on Roger Rabbit and would have seen The Thief and the Cobbler. I reached out to Andreas Deja, but he didn't get back to me. Maybe he saw me citing Disney War in a previous video like an idiot, but I think it's fair to assume that, some inspiration was taken with Jafar's design.
Ridiculous nonsense, Your Highness. He's obviously lying.
But the whole evil vizier thing is one of the most recurring archetypes in the 1001 Nights. Scheming viziers who, envy the young hero, lust after a woman, or seek the king's favor, they're a stock character throughout the collection. They frequently appear particularly in the Persian and Indian origin tales, and this vizier archetype is present even in the oldest surviving layers of the text. It probably reflected court politics of the Abbasid or Sassanid area, I don't know. Hell, this character is even there in the Bible, in the Book of Esther, in the form of Haman. Characters like Jafar and Zigzag are a westernized interpretation of a very old Indian and Middle Eastern trope. I'm just saying, I find the argument that Party A stole the idea of an evil scheming Grand Vizier in a Middle Eastern fantasy from Party B pretty weak. So I'm not going to try to debunk the whole Disney stole the design thing because it's the type of thing we will never know. Williams' camp thinks Disney ripped them off.
Yeah, we were very aware of that. And we were very aware that they had ripped us off.
The Disney camp stays mostly silent on it. The evolution of characters like Jafar and Genie is extremely well documented, but we weren't in these people's minds, so we don't know where the inspiration for that curly beard came from.
And your beard is so twisted.
But here's the thing, in the arts, people are always like, this thing that I made was influenced by that thing that I like, and that's cool. And people are open and honest about the fact that thing A influenced thing B. They admit it, proudly. Like, Zigzag to me is very obviously inspired by Blue Meanies from Yellow Submarine.
Hills is not alive.
In fact, a lot of the design of the Thief and the Cobbler feels very Yellow Submarine. There's a lot in the Thief and the Cobbler that looks like it could have just as easily been in Pink Floyd's The Wall, which also makes sense. Williams and Gerald Scarfe were very well acquainted. So there's no shame in this. The Simpsons already did it. There's nothing new under the sun. So if the Disney animators were influenced by Williams and the Thief and the Cobbler, why not just admit it? Be like, yep, there's a little bit of zigzag in Jeff. Particularly the mouth area, the curly beard and the teeth and that. And I think the answer is that suspicious timing. Aladdin came out in 1992, the same year Williams lost control of The Thief and the Cobbler. By the time the film was released as Arabian Night, 3 years later, Williams' tragedy was well known within the industry, and so you want to be like, yeah, that movie that got butchered, well, it definitely inspired us back when its beloved creator still had control of it. I can see why they stayed quiet on it. It's a bad idea to draw attention to The Thief and the Cobbler. It's a bad look. In researching this, I saw a ton of unattributed statements that Williams long held that Disney ripped him off, but I can find absolutely no direct evidence of him ever actually doing this. Did he think Disney stole from him? Some of his collaborators certainly do.
You look at the design of the Zio, whatever that character is in Aladdin, and you look at the design of the equivalent character in this film, and you'll see that Disney just stole it. It's as plain as the nose in your face. Except Dick's been around for 20 years.
Your family and just
many animators in the world have passed through that studio.
Like, babe,
every animator
that
in the
means
studio takes away the stuff
if
that
you're
they're
worried
working on,
about
takes away
me
the
having
So, obviously it's gone now.
you have to wait until I have, like...
He's not quoting in this documentary about the creation of the Thief and the Cobbler, but the people who worked with him indicate that he just kind of shrugged it off.
I think you too.
Not really. I'm not saying actually.
Just, that's the way it is.
So where does this narrative come from? Well, best I can tell, like so many things, it appears to have originated with Disney War, which I now realize is flawed. I regret helping to popularize it as a source. Like here he is saying that Howard Ashman won the Oscar for A Whole New World. He didn't, that was Tim Rice. And here he is comparing Beauty and the Beast to The Little Mermaid. Like so many of the classic fairy tales, the original Beauty and the Beast has dark overtones and an unhappy ending. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Timothy, what do you think happens at the end of Beauty and the Beast? That the Beast dies and Beauty's like, wow, that sure was a beast who was never at any point a prince. Do you think the Frog Prince ends with she throws the frog against the roll and like, oh my god, I can't believe I kissed a frog. This is also like a third edition with like a new afterword, and still no one caught this shit. Did this book, have a copy of it. There's this part of the book where he quotes Peter Schneider, probably from a direct interview, saying that, we took the best out of Richard. Schneider conceded ruefully. Stewart frames this quote as like an admission of guilt rather than we learned a lot from working with Williams, and that is really deceptive. I know. But the question of did Disney steal the designs or are they just drawing from the same Orientalist tropes and aesthetics is not the most insidious accusation against the Disney company as it pertains to The Thief and the Cobbler. So the story goes, Disney and Spielberg promised Williams that in return for directing Who Framed Roger Rabbit, they would help finance and distribute The Thief and the Cobbler. Is there any truth to that?
Hasta que a mediados de los 80, Steven Spielberg y Robert Zemeckis ven algunas escenas terminadas de esta película, una de las condiciones para contratar a Richard Williams era que Warner Brothers terminara de financiar el proyecto del ladrón de Zapatero.
But Disney and Spielberg told Williams that in turn for doing Roger Rabbit, that they would help distribute The Thief and the Cobbler. Well, boy, that was a fat fucking lie.
I can find no evidence that Spielberg or Disney ever made so much as a gentleman's agreement, let alone a promise that they would do this thing. I can find nothing more concrete than Williams wanted this thing to happen, going all the way back to an animation Usenet forum from 1997, quoting Steve Worth, the guy who worked at Spumco, the company that made Ren and Stimpy. The story I heard was that when Richard Williams did Roger Rabbit, he hoped it would lead to Disney financing the completion of The Thief and the Cobbler. After Roger Rabbit was completed, Williams screened the uncompleted work print for the Disney brass. They quietly passed on the project. Soon after, they announced Aladdin was in production. So again, we don't know for sure, but the odds that promises were made and broken are very unlikely. What probably happened was they said they'd take a look at it, they did, they didn't want it, and then Disney announced Aladdin tidbit is also kind of dishonest. This was not a situation where the studio saw Williams' project and went, now there's an idea, and then stole it. We know whose idea Aladdin was and when it was pitched. Aladdin was the brainchild of one guy, Howard Ashman.
What dialogue? Dialogue.
Howard Ashman was an extraordinary lyricist and playwright and director. He was one of the most important figures responsible for the Disney Renaissance.
The initial take on Aladdin was a wink at the Hope Road Pictures.
Sure wish I had a drink.
A wink at the Fleischer cartoons. It was very stylish, very buddy. And a friend like me was pure, fat squalor craziness.
It was pretty clear that Howard was just nuts about Aladdin. And it made sense because he played Aladdin on stage in Baltimore when he was just a kid.
Giving birth does weird things to your brain. I cry all the time now. Like, loud, open weeping at Hamnet. Thank God I watched it alone. I don't even know if that movie was good, but it was really sad. Why are there so many movies with children dying as a plot point nominated for Best Picture this year? One thing I will cry about, especially while I was researching this, like watching that extremely low budget Howard documentary on Disney Plus, is just the thought that Howard Ashman did not live to see Beauty and the Beast to completion. Because Beauty and the Beast is the best Disney movie. No, I will not be taking questions at this time. It's the best one. And like so much of Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid, and especially Aladdin, came directly from Howard Ashman, who died from AIDS before Beauty and the Beast was completed.
And I had already lost a lot of people, like, I worked with, we all had it, especially in New York theater. And it was a death sentence. Howard was going to die.
He didn't even get to see the early test screenings, like Beauty and the Beast being screened at the New York Film Festival and getting a standing ovation. Like the producers came to him as he was dying to tell him how great the screenings were, and he couldn't physically get out of bed to go see them.
So we went to see him, and he was 80 pounds and lost his sight.
Beauty and the Beast was still months away from being done, so we went to visit Howard, and we all were really aware that this was probably the last time we would see him. And I bent over to say my goodbyes and tell him what he meant to us. And I said, Howard, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, people love this movie. Who'd have thought? And Howard said, I would have.
Because Beauty and the Beast was a total shit show before he got involved, and he basically saved the project single-handedly, obviously, but like he basically saved the project. It's good that Ashman got as much done as he did, but his story is incredibly sad.
Howard and I shared a home and a life together, and I'm very happy and very proud to accept this for him. But it is bittersweet. This is the first Academy Award given to someone we've lost to AIDS. There's an inscription at Howard's grave in Baltimore. It reads, "Oh, that he had one more song to sing." We'll never hear that song.
Matt Bound did a video about why Disney got good for a while, and it pretty much sums it up. Like, I think there would have been no Disney Renaissance without Howard Ashman. And, it kind of started to fall apart after he died. The thing about Ashman as a lyricist, which you never see in any of the other Disney movies, is his lyrics are,
Every last inch of me's covered with hair. I'm especially good at expectorating. Can you flex, show some respect down on one knee?
And my personal favorite. Like, are you kidding me? Genius. Look, 10 out of 10. Disney would never be this good again.
My favorite line is 50 Frenchmen can't be wrong. Which is that's an old song from the 20s, isn't it? Only Howard would put a line like that in the climax where you're going to kill the hero of the movie, and he sticks in a reference to a 20s Cole Porter musical.
Ashman is the credited lyricist for The Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin, but does not come close to what his contribution to those movies were. He shaped those movies. He was considered the uncredited third director for Beauty and the Beast, especially, because no one at Disney knew how to write a musical.
Today marks the 40th anniversary. Unbelievable, 40 years.